I think I need a new Stephen King shirt. Literally, this is the only one I have, and I use it for the introductions to make this feel like a Stephen King video. Also, hi, welcome back to Gavin Reads It All. We are getting back into Stephen King. It has been a few months. The last episode I did, which was episode 5, covered 2 of the largest Stephen King books I've ever read, other than The Stand, but like It and The Tommyknockers, both in one video, was quite intense. So I needed just a little bit of a break, and then I hit a reading slump in around about July, which was when I kind of wanted this video to go up, because I like to do Gavin Reads All the King every 2 or 3 months, and July or August would have been perfect to get this video out. However, I did get into that slump, and I didn't want it to affect my enjoyment of Stephen King. So this one has been a long time coming. I do apologize for the wait, but make sure you grab yourself a hot drink because we are back. We are so back. And I'm very excited for this episode because it's going to be a little bit different to the previous episodes in a way. I am going to be doing the short stories / novellas in like almost every other episode. And I'll be reading my very first Stephen King short stories and novella collections in this video. So I will be starting with Night Shift, and then I will be going on 2 different seasons. And this is going to be really interesting because this is the least amount of books I've read for a Stephen King episode. However, I do want to review every single short story with spoilers and maybe in detail. I don't know like how in depth I can go with the short stories, but I do want to talk about each single one and then rate them and give the collections an overall rating and then see how it fits with my Stephen King leaderboard. So yes, this video will be filled with spoilers, so if you have not yet read the collections, Night Shift, or different seasons, then please do go and read them first and then come back and then use the timestamps below. Or if you don't care about spoilers and you're never going to read these books, then feel free to continue on. And make sure you leave this video a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, thank you. So in Night Shift, the short stories we have are Introduction by John... No, that's our short story, hang on. Jerusalem's Lot, Graveyard Shift, Night Surf, I Am the Doorway, The Mangler, The Boogeyman, Grey Matter, Battleground, Trucks, Sometimes They Come Back, Strawberry Spring, The Ledge, The Lawnmower Man, Quitters Incorporated, I Know What You Need, Children of the Corn, The Last Rung on the Ladder, The Man Who Loved Flowers, One for the Road, and The Woman in the Room. Now, I've never read any of these short stories before, and I've actually never seen any of the adaptations as well. I think The Boogeyman has been made into a film. Obviously, Children of the Corn, I know of that horror movie series, but I've never watched a single one. So this will be all totally brand new to me. And then with different seasons, this is quite a bigger book, and I feel like because it's 4 novellas, I feel like this one might take a little while to talk about as well. So I was wondering, like, should I have done a separate video? Like, should I have done Night Shift in one video and then different seasons in another? But it's too late now. So in this one, we have Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. That's the first story. Never seen the movie, just saying. And then we have Apt Pupil. I don't even know if that got made into a movie. Then we have The Body, which I believe was made into a film called Stand By Me. Never seen it. And then we have The Breathing Method to round out different seasons. And yeah, I love the idea of this being a different season each time. So we have Hope Springs Eternal, Summer of Corruption, Fall from Innocence, and A Winter's Tale. I love that kind of thread between them and that kind of theme of different seasons and changing and all of that. I feel like this will be a really cool one to get through. But yeah, each of the like novellas are, you know, a good decent size. So this probably could have been its own video, but yeah, we're just going to cover Night Shift in different seasons in this video. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, so I'm most likely going to shut up. And yeah, I'm very excited to get back into Mr. King and his writing. And yeah, to read my very first Stephen King short stories. Let's dive straight into our first stories from Night Shift. I also have a playlist for all of my Gavin Reads All the King episodes so far, so if you have not yet checked out any of the episodes, then I will leave a link to that playlist down in the description box. Enjoy! Oh, we are so back. I have missed reading Stephen King so much, and reading this has really helped me want to like do the next episode like pretty much straight away. And this is Stephen King's first short story collection. I do believe that this is one of Stephen King's most beloved short story collections, and I really freaking enjoyed it. I mean, there were some stories that kind of drag it down just a little bit, but I think the majority of these stories are like actually pretty solid. And I didn't give a single story 1 star, by the way. The lowest is a 2. And I still think that's like pretty decent for a short story. Like there was nothing in this collection that I like actively hated. So that's a huge win in my eyes. But yeah, I managed to read and listen to this as well. So I do have the audiobook for this. It is missing 4 of the short stories. And also the other short stories are in such a random order as well. However, I will say, this is a disclaimer, even though I listened to the audiobook and read along physically, The audiobook never drags a rating down for a book for me because I did not like the audiobook. The music was way too loud in many of the stories. It made it hard to actually like be able to listen to the words. So I'm glad I had the physical book to read along with. And again, like I always get like a little bit of like, oh, why do you do both the physical and the audio at the same time? That's so convoluted. I love to immerse myself in Stephen King's words. And so using the audiobook helps me to drown everything else out. But yeah, as much as I didn't like the audiobook all that much, not only because it was missing 4 short stories and the rest of them were in a random ass order, but yeah, like there were just some issues with it I personally had. I did like the narrator. I thought the narrator was fine. But yeah, it wasn't a great audiobook experience in my opinion. And I did make a note of all the chapters of the audiobooks and where everything kind of fits in the random ass order it is. So I'm going to show you on the screen right now the order of the short stories that are in the physical collection and then where they end up in the audiobooks. So I want to rapid fire the chapters in order in the physical book and then where it ended up in the audiobook. So we have chapter 11, then chapter 7, then chapter 10, then I Am the Doorway is not even included. And then we have chapter 16, chapter 1, chapter 4, chapter 6, Trucks is not included. Then we have chapter 13, chapter 3, chapter 15, chapter 12, chapter 14, chapter 2, Children of the Corn is not included. And then chapter 9, chapter 8, One for the Road is not included. And then finally chapter 5. So it is a very random ass order. And I think the 4 stories that were included, probably like some copyright issues or what have you. And that's probably why they're not included. If anyone knows why the 4 stories are not included, please let me know down below. I imagine Children of the Corn is probably because it's like made into like a movie franchise. Maybe there's like some kind of thing there. I have no idea. But yeah, anyway, let's get into every single story and what I thought of it and what I rated it. So firstly, we have Jerusalem's Lot, and that is connected to Salem's Lot, one of my favorite Stephen King books so far. And I actually really enjoyed this short story. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. And a lot of the reasons why I did that was because one, I do love Salem's Lot a lot. So to hear any more things about the town and a bit of the history and a bit of the backstory, I will love. I will absolutely love. And also I love the fact that it was in an epistolary format and it gave me Dracula vibes. You know, we have the first few chapters in Dracula being this epistolary novel and we have a guy go to, you know, Dracula's castle and give an account of what's happening there. And that's kind of how this feels to me, like this first story where we have Charles writing letters to, well, firstly Bones, and then we also have Richard come up as well. And firstly, I wasn't sure if Charles would be a reliable narrator because Charles mentions how some of the townsfolk react to him and his friend Calvin tells him, "They think you mad, Mr. Boone." I laughed and said that perhaps they had heard of the brain fever I suffered after my Sarah died. So I was like, okay, is there like some kind of unreliable narrator thing gonna like come into this? We come across the house. It's a constant amazement, 23 rooms. There are portraits like of his family there as well, which is like very, very cool to hear about. Yeah, more mentions of a deserted village of Jerusalem's Lot. And this is set in 1850, like October 1850. And I was getting such Resident Evil Village vibes from this. I'm not gonna lie. I love Resident Evil Village. And that's kind of what I was picturing as I was reading the story. Yeah, we hear about disappearances like very briefly, and then we have him come across Mrs. Cloris, who, you know, talks about the town and some of the, you know, history of it as well. And she says, some die not, some live in the twilight shadows between to serve him. And it's just like this really chilling way of telling the story through dialogue because they, well, I mean, if you've read Salem's Lot, you will know that it is to do with like vampires and stuff. So when she says that some die not, some live in the twilight shadows between to serve him, you can get that like little aha moment. And also there's quite a lot of stuff to do with rats in this short story collection as well. One of them is that Cal and Charles hear, well, what they think is rats in like the walls and stuff. They hear like strange inaudible laughs. They find hiding places in the house as well. So again, it's just feeding my imagination and my wonderment for, you know, the house and for Jerusalem's Lot itself. The worm that doth corrupt is mentioned. And I find that so interesting as well because like, I'll not spoil like Children of the Corn for anyone in this section in case you haven't read Children of the Corn just yet. But there is something in Children of the Corn that is mentioned that's very similar to that. He who walks behind the rose. And then we also have the worm that doth corrupt. It's just like, there's many mentions in this short story collection of, you know, something that, how can I explain it? Like a he who must not be named kind of character. But with Cal and Charles kind of exploring, they are having like the slow realization that something is wrong. And so when they're going into like this tavern and they realize it's never been touched, table and chairs stood about like ghostly guardians of the watch, dusty walked by the extreme changes in temperature, which the New England climate is known for, but otherwise perfect. There is not a haunted house which stands with windows intact. yet the innkeeper's glass was intact, as were the other fragile items we found in our porkings. And they realized Jerusalem's Lot is a shunned town. Because if it was just deserted, then surely there would have been, poachers and plunderers, and people would have vandalized it and stuff like that. But no, nobody even dares to touch it. And it's that kind of slow realization that really got me for this first story of this collection. Nothing seemed to live or move in all this but ourselves. We saw no insects, no birds, not even a cobweb fashioned in a window corner, only dust. And it just made me think back to the old Gothic classics of the 1800s, the 1700s, the ones that I genuinely love and adore. And it has that same kind of language, that same knowing sense of dread that comes through observation of the characters, where they do slowly realize there's something wrong. Lord, there's no Lord here. There's just that desolation and loneliness that comes from this that I really did love. The noises of the house have intensified, and I'm growing more to the conclusion that rats are not all that moves within our walls. And they have people screaming, "Don't come back, there's evil up there, cursed, cursed, cursed." I would love a full-ass story of Jerusalem's Lot set in the 1800s. I'm talking a 1,000-page novel. I don't just want a short story about Jerusalem's Lot. And this isn't the only Salem's Lot kind of story in this collection, thank God. Because again, I will eat any of that up. And then I think this is in relation to, because there was a spectre in the house in Salem's Lot of someone hanging, and we have Calvin and Charles go into a room, and it says, "It was as if a rotten spectre of this one sinister past had risen before us. A single chair stood in this alcove, and above it, fastened from a hook in one of the stout overhead beams, was a decayed noose of hemp." And I feel I might have to reread Salem's Lot now, because it has been over a year, but I feel that is some connection to that, I think. I fear I've awakened a force which has slept in the tenebrous village of Salem's Lot for half a century, a force which has slain my ancestors and taken them in unholy bondage as Nosferatu, the undead. I love it. I love the way that this was written. I love the older kind of language. Can't even talk about the story enough. Did I tell you I gave a 4.5 out of 5? This was genuinely a great start to this collection for me. Cal is no more. Bones, he is gone in my place, in the place of this wretch with his pipe stem arms and skull face, who I see reflected back in the darkened glass. I feel this is some of King's best atmospheric writing I've ever read. And when they find the lamb on top of the book, and then they start the low chanting, it's just genuinely one of the best. I might end up having to give this one a 5. I will sit with my ratings for a bit, and then I might change some around. But honestly, I was gripped. This had me hook, line, and sinker from the get-go. And listen to this description as well. A racked figure pulled itself up from darkness, and a half-skull peered at me. Beetles crawled over the fleshless forehead. A rotted castor clung to the askew hollows of moulded collarbones. Only the eyes lived. Red, insane pits that glared at me with more than lunacy. They glared with the empty light of the pathless waste beyond the edges of the universe. It came to take me down to darkness. Oh my God, I'm literally going to come. And he had seen the family resemblance. This all ties back to him and his family. And people think, because in a series of papers that's published afterwards, people think that Charles, because of that whole brain fever thing that we mentioned before, they think Charles murdered Calvin, and then he became paranoid and deluded with everything that went on. So this was a main character in this short story who was doomed, pretty much doomed from the start. Nobody was ever going to believe him. And then we have James Robert Boone, 1971. So a whole ass century later, he's talking about being in Jerusalem's Lot, and he's talking about Robert Boone, his grandfather, and Charles Boone, and all this, that, and the other. And then he's also there, and he's there are some huge rats in the walls by the sound. We know that ain't rats. We know there's something way more there. So we kind of ended the short story with this kind of circular moment where it's just going to happen again. The cycle is going to keep repeating, and you got to run. So I loved the first story. Second story, Graveyard Shift. I love that we continued that theme of rats. So in this one, we follow a guy called Hall, and he works at a mill, and he has a boss called Warwick, and he doesn't like Warwick. Warwick's a bit of an arsehole. And we talk pretty much instantly about the only thing that Hall doesn't like is the rats. And so we are coming back to these goddamn rats. And honestly, rats, I don't come across them often in my life, so I'm not really fully scared of them all that much. But, this story does help to enhance a little bit of fear, so if I ever do come across them, they will scare me. Although I will say as well, I was playing A Plague Tale, which obviously has a lot of rats. That did make me a little bit scared of rats too. So I was picturing Resident Evil Village for the first short story, Jerusalem's Lot, and now I'm picturing A Plague Tale for Graveyard Shift. So I feel every single thing I'm just attaching to a video game in my head. Helps me to visualize, sometimes helps me to visualize. And so the rats themselves, they just sound like a nuisance to begin with, but they slowly start getting really creepy. So Hall says, after a while, rats came out and sat atop the bags at the back of the long room, watching him with their unblinking black eyes. They looked like a jury. And I love that description, they look like a jury, because it sounds like they are deciding his fate. They're not making any moves right now, but they are slowly deciding whether or not to take action against these workers. Because the rats are like, this is our home. This is our turf. Get off, bitch. That's kind of like the vibe I'm getting from them. And now the workers are being tasked to like clean the basement and stuff. And I love the description of it as well. The place looked like the shattered nave of a desecrated church. And we kind of got this kind of visual with Jerusalem style as well. So any kind of like torn down church or like abandoned church, anything with religious imagery is going to unsettle me quite a bit. So I kind of like that the basement kind of looked like this nave of a desecrated church. And I was thinking, oh, maybe Warwick is like some kind of rat lord as well, because Hall was thinking about Warwick and about the rats. Strange how the two things seem tied together. So I was like, is Warwick leading these workers down to the basement as like a sacrifice to these rats or something? And that turns out not to be the case, but that's kind of where my mind was going to begin with. Because Hall is just incredibly suspicious of him. So then I was like, okay, this suspicion must lead somewhere, right? We hear about Ray Upson, who had to go to hospital because a rat grabbed onto his hand and started chewing. So we don't even see that. We just hear a first-hand account of it, of the rats kind of attacking them in such an awful, gruesome way. So that kind of helps to set up the rest of the story, because as they're working in the basement, two men were bitten, others refused to work until Warwick sent someone upstairs to get heavy rubberized gloves. I would have said, don't just get the gloves, get a flamethrower. Because, like, come on. A huge rat with grey streaked fur and ugly glaring eyes had bitten into his shirt and hung there, squeaking and kicking at Carmichael's belly with its back paws. This is targeted, attempted murder. You see those rats coming at you, and they're, like, literally trying to burrow themselves into your flesh. And you just want to go and get gloves? Honestly. I love that Hall ends up forcing Warwick to go, like, further into the place as well, because Warwick he's just like such an arsehole. Like, he's not a good boss or anything. And so he manages to get Warwick to go, and he uses his smarts as well. He's going to go to the town commissioner and tell him what the situation down there is, because there's like zoning laws and, you know, vermin and stuff like that. So Warwick is backed into a corner, and I love that Hall used his smarts and his brain to like get Warwick to, you know, lead the charge, essentially. The rats had closed in around them, silent as death, crowded in, rank on rank. There is a book called The Rats, isn't there? I'm sure there's like a book called The Rats I'm kind of interested in reading. Now that I've read this, I'm like, oh, I really want to read about killer rats now. And the bats too, there's bats. And it seems like the rats have mutated as well, so the hideous mutation that never could have survived under the eye of the sun, nature would have forbidden it, but down here nature had taken on another ghastly face. The rats were gigantic, some as high as 3 feet. Like, damn, the visuals here are insane and terrifying. Paul is a little bit brutal with Warwick, which honestly is kind of deserved. And when the rat gets him, Hall says goodbye, Warwick. The rat crouched over Mr. Foreman jealously, ripping at one limp arm. But even then, kind of what I love, like the kind of twist, I guess, of this story is that no one really makes it out. So even Hall, who, you know, was so smart and so brave up to this point, even he gets a flap of his scalp ripped off. And then we have the workers who were like a lot further back and didn't go into where they had to go to get like further in to see all the rats and stuff. The other workers are like, hey, we might need a couple more flashlights. I'm just like, this is not going to stop. It felt a little bit like the first story with the whole like circular kind of movement of it all, that this thing is not going to stop. It's like a circle of terror that's never going to end. So I gave that one 4.5 as well. I'm telling you, like, the start of this collection is freaking phenomenal. I love the first 2 stories so much. And then we get to Night Serve. And Night Serve, I wasn't a big fan of. I gave it 2 stars. This is the precursor to The Stand, which I have read. And essentially, it's just a guy who is a bit of a dick, Corey, and he is dating Susie. And all he does is criticize Susie. Like, she asks, like, do you love me? And he said, no, I said she was getting fat. And he's just, like, not a likable person. He's just not like a person. I did like the first line, though. After the guy was dead and the smell of his burning flesh was off the air, we all went back down to the beach. I kind of love the setup of that. And I didn't realize until Captain Trips was mentioned that this was to do with The Stand. Because, you know, The Stand is about like a pandemic and about a virus that decimates the population of Earth. And there's only a small percentage left alive on Earth. And here we have like a little story that is set in that universe, which honestly, I wouldn't mind reading more of that. But I feel like this was just like a little bit too boring to like actually have anything to do with anything. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, it's like we have like a group of people and they're surviving, but we have the main character who's pretty much complaining about his girlfriend and like reflecting on life. And that's pretty much it. Like, nothing really happens. Nothing is really like scary in this at all. He has dreams about Alvin, and he was nothing but a bloated blackened head and charred skeleton. That was probably like the only like creepy thing that happened in this pod, other than the very first line, which was great. Yeah, they're just shining. So here we were with the whole human race wiped out, not by atomic weapons or bio warfare or pollution or anything grand like that, just the flu. Like, the idea of that is genuinely terrifying, that the flu could just like wipe out the entire population, because you're like, the flu, really? But knowing what we know now and all the things that we have gone through as, you know, human beings, I don't think this story really hits the same anymore. You know what I mean? Like, we have seen that happen. It just doesn't really hit the same, because I feel like the whole gotcha moment was the whole, oh, it was the flu, just the flu. I think that was like the whole like twist of this story, is that it's the flu that got rid of everyone, not, you know, each other, not war, not, you know, biochemical weapons or what have you, just the flu. So that obviously does make your mind think, oh, okay, something as simple as the flu wiped us all out. Like, that's kind of a scary thought. It's not even just a thought anymore. It's like literally reality. So I just don't think this story was any good. So I gave it 2 out of 5, which 2 out of 5 is still pretty decent. Like, it wasn't terrible. It was just so uneventful and rather boring. And it was just mainly talking. So I just didn't really care for it. I would like never ever reread that one. So then we get to I Am the Doorway. This one isn't in the audiobook, which is a bit of a shame, because this is actually like a really good one as well. I give this one 3.5. I really enjoyed the fact that this was more of a sci-fi kind of horror. So we have Arthur, and he was an astronaut, and he's talking to Richard at the start of the story about how he apparently killed the boy. So you don't really know what's going on, and Richard is asking, you are the doorway? You are sure you killed the boy? You didn't just dream it? And Arthur says, I didn't dream it, and I didn't kill him either. I told you that. They did. I am the doorway. Richard sighed, you buried him? Yes. So, like, something weird is going on. Something weird going on. And I do love it when Stephen King starts a story with so many questions that I'm like, okay, I need to read the entire thing for me to get all the answers to this, because I'm way too intrigued. So then Arthur is saying about the story of Corey and him being boosted into orbit by the Saturn 16. So this was when I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, has Stephen King ever written a like sci-fi horror? Like, I guess other than the Tommyknockers, which I did read, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I'm not gonna lie. I think I gave it like 1.5 or 2 stars. This, I feel like I would definitely read a full novel on, because it just genuinely gets under your skin. Like, literally gets under your skin. Arthur's talking about the experiment that didn't pan out. They killed the boy last night, Richard. It wasn't a nice thing to watch or feel. His head, it exploded. And so something weird happened around Venus. That was Venus, nothing but nothing, except it scared me. It was like circling a haunted house in the middle of deep space. I know how unscientific that sounds, but I was scared gutless. Honestly, like, that terrifies me, to think that you're in deep space. You are literally like one of the only people out there, nothing around, no one can hear you scream, no one can hear you say anything or anything. Like, you are literally there on your own. And to have that feeling of circling a haunted house in the middle of deep space, that feeling genuinely gives me goosebumps. And I would love for this to be embellished more and played on more as well. So if anyone has any good like deep space horror, oh my god, please hit me up. 12 days later, Corey was dead and I was crippled for life. And then we have like some of the grossest like body horror, like his flesh, there's like red spots on his flesh. It appeared hot, feverish, and the flesh was soft and jellied, like the flesh of an apple gone rotten. However, it's not just like leprosy or anything like that. There were eyes peering up at me through the splits in the flesh of my fingers. Oh, that's disgusting. And even as I watched, the flesh was dilating, retreating, as they pushed their mindless way up to the surface. But that was not what made me scream. I had looked into my own face and seen a monster. The idea that when you're in deep space and you've brought something back with you, kind of thing, like something has inhabited your body, and through like the slits on your and you've got like eyes looking up, oh no, like genuinely I can't do it. That made me feel so nauseous and so sick. I might have to bump this rating up, actually. I might have to bump it up to a 4 instead of a 3.5, I'm not gonna lie. So then we go back to Arthur talking to Richard. They used me to move him. They're getting the upper hand, Richard. They're forcing their doorway open a little at a time. But Richard notices, oh, you can't walk though, Arthur. You're dead from the waist down. And then Arthur says about the dune buggy, this is dead too, but when you enter it, you can make it go. You could make it kill. I am the doorway. Can't you understand that? They killed the boy, Richard. They moved the body. See, the idea of losing control of your body is one of my biggest fears. And I keep saying this in probably every single Stephen King video. I'm like, oh, this is my biggest fear. This is my biggest fear. Because Stephen King loves to tap into that. And I need him to stop. He can't trust himself as well. He tells Richard to run. He's like, if I ever seem like I'm going to hurt you, run. Because you just can't predict what your actions are going to be when you're taking over like this. You can't predict it. So again, like that, just goosebumps. And then to end this as well, like this, that was all 7 years ago. And then it started again 3 weeks ago, you see. There is a perfect circle of 12 golden eyes on my chest. Like, fuck. Like, that is like such a desolate ending as well. I feel like every single main character so far in these short stories have been unable to escape the horrors of what they're enduring. And I feel like this is such a great like short story collection that's tied with the themes that there is a horror that the main character has to face, and they never seem to overcome it, at least for the most part. And I genuinely find that so utterly terrifying. I'm going to repeat myself so many times because I'm talking about each short story, but like, that is just a terrifying concept to me. What do you mean we can't win? What do you mean we can't fight back properly? What do you mean we're going to lose? You know, like that kind of feels like the theme of this short story collection. I'm going to keep it at a 3.5 for now, but I'm going to look into that rating and I could potentially bump it up later on. So you just watch. Okay, the next story is The Mangler, and this one was so good. I love the title of it as well because it just sounds like some kind of iconic horror movie villain. But The Mangler is just machinery, essentially. It's one of those like folding machines like that you kind of use for laundry. The Hadley Watson Model 6 speed ironer and folder. And so, like, hey, like when you think about it, humans are putting clothing and stuff through this, but you know, to actually be treated like that, to be put through the Mangler yourself, is that whole role reversal that dooms humanity, essentially. This is like machines fighting back. And I did enjoy Christine when I read it, so this kind of gave me a little bit of Christine vibes, because this Mangler feels alive. Mrs. Frawley was essentially put through it. We don't really see her body, we just see Hunton, who is the police officer person who's come to investigate the scene, and he turned around, put a convulsive hand to his mouth and threw up. Like, we know that this is a gory, gruesome, nasty scene. It's something that I feel like a lot of us have probably envisioned, someone accidentally going through a machine and getting mangled, and that is just like genuinely, again, like terrifying. It sounds gory and nasty, and that's exactly what we're getting through Hunton's reaction. In the audiobook of this, it like really pissed me off. I still really enjoyed the story. I'm giving it a 4.5. It hasn't prevented me from giving it a 5 because the audiobook was so bad, but it was starting to piss me off in the audiobook because the sound of the Mangler or like loud music would start playing like every couple of paragraphs, and it would get so loud I couldn't hear the words. The audiobook is genuinely terrible. One of the worst. I hated the audiobook. Oh my god. But it's the idea that there is a safety bar to prevent people from like dying in this machine or even getting hurt by it. But even that doesn't stop the Mangler from killing someone. And so you just think, okay, all of these things that humans have put in place to stop, you know, bad things happening to people, and that's still not working. Again, that's like such a desolate and hopeless kind of thing for us to go through. What is the solution? What is the solution? You don't know what that is as you're reading this. You're describing an impossible accident. Seriously, yeah. There's no way that this could happen at all. And yet it happened. So how are we supposed to rationalize it? How are we supposed to overcome it if we can't explain it? It's even explained a little bit later on. It was like the Aina was breathing like a dragon. Personifying this machine is just like, this is what happens when machines fight back. You know, these are man-made objects, and have we gone too far? You know what I mean? Like, I love kind of little explorations of that. Like, have we made our own downfall? Has that already happened because of our, you know, stupidity, our naivety, our egos? Have we doomed ourselves through making these kinds of things? And I kind of love like trying to explain how it started. There was a young girl who was a virgin who bled onto the machine. The machine tasted blood and found it liked it. Again, like, that's just genuinely kind of terrifying. It sounds a little bit ridiculous, sounds a little bit silly, but it's actually terrifying the way it's described. Stephen King can make such a random, silly thing sound scary. George Stanner ends up losing an arm to it as well, so we actually hear, oh, the ripping of the flesh. Ugh. It's gnarly. It's genuinely a very gnarly story. So yeah, they are like trying to fight it and stuff, but it's just, how do you fight something you don't fully understand, you know? And the whole fight sequence as well, with like Jackson and everyone hunting, it was so exciting. It was a very good kind of confrontation. And we end the story with Hunton asking for help and gets to the home of Roger Martin. The bloody Mangler has followed. It's actually broken free. It's actually roaming the streets. And that's how we end the story. Again, with like desolation, with hopelessness. It's so good. So 4.5 for the Mangler. So I was going to say, like, fantastic ratings. And then we get to the Boogeyman, and I can totally see why people love this story. And don't get me wrong, I thought it was really good too. It's not my favorite one though. I gave it 4 stars. This is the kind of story where I love the subject matter. I love what it's talking about more than I do the actual execution of it. And I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but I really don't like the ending of it. It sticks to the theme though of desolation, that the main character can't survive or escape. It fits that theme by the end, but I just thought it was probably like the most ridiculous ending that we've read so far. Not surprised this was chapter 1 in the audiobook too. It's a good one to start with, honestly, to give you a vibe of what to expect. But yeah, we have Lester Billings, who is talking to Dr. Harper, and he says, all I did was kill my kids, one at a time, kill them all. And so you think, oh my god, like, what the hell? But no, it's like that thing again with the guy from I Am the Doorway who was like, I killed that person. Wait, no, actually, I was just responsible for it. I didn't actually do it. You know, so we kind of had that again. So I was already like a little bit annoyed with that because I was like, I don't like it when, you know, authors do that. Like, I killed that person. I didn't actually kill them. I was just responsible for it, or I did something that made, you know what I mean? I'm not a fan of that. Yeah, do you mean you actually killed them? Oh, no, but I was responsible. I was like, okay, we've just heard that in another story. It's a little bit too repetitive at this point. So we had Denny in 1967 and Shirl in 1971 and Andie this year. So I do love the idea of talking about something traumatic that we already know has happened. Like, we already know that 3 of his kids have died, and we're about to hear how. Like, I like that premise, that setup. They were murdered, see. Only no one believes that. And Harper asks, who killed the children? The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman killed them all. Just came out of the closet and killed them. Terrifying. I can imagine for so many people across the world, that bedroom closet has always been a source of fear and anxiety because you just don't know what's going to come out of it, you know? Whether it's coming out from under the bed or from the closet. I feel like the Boogeyman is just like such a universal fear. And don't get me wrong, that is something I feel for the story, but I don't like the way it's told. I don't like the narration style. I don't like the main character, which is purposeful. I think that's very purposeful. I don't think he's a main character that you root for or like. You know, he's an awful, awful person. He doesn't sound like a very good dad, honestly. So it's not the fact that we have an unlikable narrator that's the issue for me. It's just I don't like the way he tells the story. Like, I would have preferred if this was maybe like a more third-person account of like the 3 instances that this happened, rather than him telling, you know, Dr. Harper about it. And yeah, like the first kid, before like he dies, he says, Boogeyman. The kid says, Boogeyman, Daddy. I turned off the light, went into our room and asked Rita why she wanted to teach the kid a word like that. I was tempted to slap her around a little, but I didn't. It's just like, oh my god, how easy it is for these characters to want to just commit domestic abuse. It's so much. It's so awful. And yeah, this poor kid is like terrified. I feel like throwing them both out a window. Christ, kids drive you crazy sometimes. You could kill them. So like part of me was like, okay, maybe the Boogeyman is him. I kind of would have loved that twist. It turns out not to be him. But like, imagine if he was the Boogeyman. That could have been interesting because, you know, we have that kind of obvious. I mean, that's obvious. That would be an obvious kind of, you know, tie into that if he was. But I probably would have preferred it to the actual editing of this because I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. Yeah, talking about the kids and the way that they die is like, it seemed like a natural death, even though he knew it wasn't. So there's also that kind of psychological thing that kind of prevents the Boogeyman from being found out and from like adults to actually take action against it, because the way the kids die, it seems quite natural. And even though this poor child died, this arsehole moves his next child into Denny's old room a month after the funeral. Would you ever really do that? Would you move your kid into the room where your previous kid died like that? And then when she starts saying, Boogeyman, Daddy, Boogeyman, even Lester is like, that threw a jump in me. I want to take her into our room for the night. And Dr. Hopper was like, did you? It's like, no. How could I go to Rita and admit I was wrong? He obviously puts his own pride and his own stubbornness above the safety of his children. You know, like, he's just a terrible person. A month later, the Boogeyman got her. It happened so fast, opened the door real quick. Something moved. Back in the shadows by the closet, something slithered. So he actually has seen the Boogeyman at this point. Well, he doesn't actually like say the Boogeyman, but like he saw something. So then the next baby comes along. He realizes, I love him the most of all. Out of all his children, he loves this one the most. He actually sees the Boogeyman this time. It had him. It was shaking him just like a terrier shakes a piece of cloth. I could see something with awful slumped shoulders and a scarecrow head. And I could smell something like a dead mouse in a popped bottle. And I heard it when Andy's neck broke. Like, heartbreaking. Like, we have some heartbreaking descriptions and stuff here, but I feel like the tension was kind of lost to me by this point because I wasn't feeling the tense buildup to, you know, like the premise of the story, which was, you know, these 3 children dying by the Boogeyman. And I didn't really feel scared by this point. I think because I just really, again, just did not like the way that the main character was telling the story. So again, I would have loved this more in a different format. At the very end, we see Lester leave the office and then come back in, and the closet door was open just a crack. So nice, a voice from the closet said, so nice. And then Lester is rid of the spot as the closet door swung open. So nice, the Boogeyman said as it shambled out. It still held its Dr. Hopper mask in one rotted spade claw hand. A Dr. Hopper mask. So he was the doctor the Boogeyman was the doctor the entire time. So he can talk and look like a normal person. He has like a mask that makes him look like the actual therapist person. I didn't like that. I thought that was really shit. I thought that was really stupid. So I gave this one 4 stars. It could have been a 4.5 had it not been for that ending, and it could have been a 5 if it was told in a different way. So I don't know if that's unpopular opinion. I do apologize. Still a great rating if you ask me, just not my favorite story. So then we have Grey Matter. So this one, we have about 5 or 6 people. They are gathered at this like kind of pub or tavern place. We have like Henry, Bill, Bertie, Carl, and me. What was his name again? There's so many character names to remember. Oh my god. It's snowing quite badly, and this young boy walks in, and he is the son of Richie. And they haven't seen Richie for a couple of months. And this is when like the kid, Richie's son, he tells them about his dad and about him starting to look like a grey lump. When he gets close to his old man, he starts to notice kind of rotten smell. This plays on the fear of seeing your parent change drastically in front of your eyes for the worst. And there's like nothing you can really do about it, and kind of what that does to you as a person. But yeah, then we have Richie. He's a great big grey lump, not like a man at all, slithering over the floor, leaving a grey slimy trail behind it. Sounds like something from like a Junji Ito, honestly. And then it sort of snaked out Nom, pried off a board off the wall and took out a cat. It was a putrefied or putreficated cat, a dead cat essentially, and ate it. So like that is gross. But I'm just like, the cohesiveness of the story is not like all together there. It just seems like a little bit random, and he just wants his beer. He keeps asking for his beer, and he's just like drinking this beer. It seems like that's what might be turning him. It was a huge grey wave of jelly that looked like a man and leaving a trail of slime behind it. So like, it almost feels like this is a precaution against drinking too much beer in a way, and changing so much that your own children become afraid of you and scared of you. It felt like that was probably like a theme that this was tackling, but I don't really have that much to say about this story at all. Like, I could see what Stephen King was doing with it, but it didn't leave too much of an impression on me. But it wasn't bad by any means, so that's why I gave it a 3. And yeah, it was interesting to follow along, I guess. Then we have Battleground, and this one I'm not the biggest fan of. It felt a little bit like a twisted Toy Story in a way. Again, it was just like so random. We have Mr. Renshaw, who gets a package. I think his first name is John Renshaw. Human whole constructed by both genetics and environment to do 2 things superbly: kill and survive. So then he gets his package. He gets back to his house. The Vietnam footlocker was rocking, and tiny foot soldiers about 1.5 inches tall began to crawl out. And then it's just like a full-on war, essentially, with these tiny little toy soldier things, and this man, Renshaw, kicked it, and the tiny body flew across the room to splatter on the wall. The little bastard shot me. So they're bringing like more and more kind of weapons out and stuff and trying to shoot Renshaw. They even have like a little rocket launcher and stuff. And the penthouse that he's in, he just tries to like burn it down essentially. And that's kind of how he wants to overcome these like tiny little things. And the whole apartment blows up, and Renshaw doesn't make it. So yet again, we have a main character who doesn't quite make it. And yeah, it seems like what else was in the little package was a scale model thermonuclear weapon. So it sounds like pretty intense, but I didn't really like it all that much. I was like, okay, like he randomly gets a package, he opens it in his apartment, there's a little bit of a battle between them, the apartment blows up, the end. I don't know, it just didn't thrill me. So I gave it 2 stars. The next one is Trucks. This is another one that is not in the audiobook. And again, it's another one that I wasn't really the biggest fan of. I just didn't really see the whole point in it all that much, other than it being a little bit like the Mangler in the sense that we have machinery that comes to life. And a little bit like Christine as well. So like, this is Trucks that seems to come to life. And while again, like I do like the idea of machinery coming to life, and it can be done effectively, even if I've read it before, like Christine I'd read, and then I really enjoyed the Mangler. This one, it just felt like maybe it was like getting a little bit repetitive. And also I don't really understand the point of it by the end too, because we have these trucks that are killing people and they are sentient, and you know, it almost feels like a zombie apocalypse in a way, because the people can't like leave like the building without being like ran over and stuff. However, through like Morse code, through like honking, the trucks convey to the humans that they need to be filled up with gas, essentially. And so someone goes out to fill them up with gas, and like that's kind of like how we end the story in a little way. Like I guess the idea of it is that, again, we have like another desolate, hopeless situation. But by this point, I'm like, the trucks, like, I mean, yes, they can run us down, and like, obviously that would be genuinely terrifying and stuff like that. But I just didn't really care for the story, like, at all. It was chilling when I said like there was no one in the trucks. So again, like the idea of a car driving itself without a driver, it is a scary thought. And with them like patrolling outside, but at the same time, it's also like, I'm trying to visualize it a little bit, but it seems a little bit ridiculous. And again, I said before, Stephen King can write ridiculous stuff and make it sound scary. But this one, I was like, nah, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not really feeling it. There doesn't seem to be any like loyalty with the trucks to the owners as well, because a trucker says, my own rig's out there right now, been driving here for 6 years, but if I stepped out that door, there's no loyalty with these machines. Doesn't matter if you've been driving them for 6 years or not, it will run you down and kill you. So that idea is a little bit unnerving. But I feel like because the whole story by the end of this turned out to be the Morse code with the honking, in them saying, attention, someone must pump fuel, someone will not be harmed, all fuel must be pumped, this shall be done now, now someone will pump fuel, I think we ought to fuel them, you want to be their slaves. And the main character saying that he'll pump them up. And there is the idea that they might, as a civilization, as humanity, go back and revert to being like cavemen. So it says we could run, maybe. It would be easy to make the drainage ditch now, the way they're stacked up, run through the fields, through the marshy places where trucks would bog down like mastodons and go back to the caves. It seems like human invention, human machinery that is supposed to progress humanity and bring us forward is going to regress us and like put us back in time to like the time of the cavemen, because we've relied too much on what we've created, that as soon as that turns against us, we will go straight back to the beginning. Again, I do get that. I totally understand that, but I felt like the conviction and the conveying of the story wasn't amazing to me. I didn't love it. So 2 stars for trucks. I could have totally taken that out of this entire collection and I would have been happier for it. Again, though, not terrible at all. Like, none of these stories are terrible. I just didn't feel anything for it. The next one, however, Sometimes They Come Back, I did genuinely enjoy. I thought this was good. And also one of the longer ones as well. So I do like the bit of a longer short story, because sometimes I feel like they do help to convey. Like, I know it's like not exactly the point of the short stories. And I do love the fact that Stephen King is writing these in a much more shorter and punchier way, because sometimes his novels do get a little bit long. And there's a lot of backstory, a lot of context, a lot of stuff that could potentially be cut out. But in the short stories, I feel like a lot of them just get straight to the point, which is great. And the impact of what they're trying to say is great too. So that's why I feel like Sometimes They Come Back does very, very well. So we follow Jim Norman. And I had it right here, familiar name. I feel like Stephen King writes so many names the same. Because even Jim's wife is called Norma, and there are so many characters called Norma in Stephen King's books. My mum is called Norma as well, so it always takes me by surprise. And then I can never really like differentiate. Like, I'm sure I've heard the name Jim Norman before. Maybe a character's been called Jim and another one's been called Norman. Like, just so many characters like blend in one. So that's the only thing I will criticize Stephen King for, is that I really do wish that he would change up character names just to help me differentiate between them. But anyway, Jim Norman. We hear about the fact that he is being interviewed for Harold Davis High School and that he had a breakdown and his brother Wayne was murdered in the past. And it seems like the person who murdered his brother was never found, or, I mean, they had suspects, but like they were never caught. This is when the music in the audiobook got a little bit too loud again. But after the kids were gone, something old and brooding seemed to settle over the halls and whisper in the empty rooms. Some black, noxious beast, never quite in view. Sometimes, as he walked down the wing 4 corridor towards the parking lot with his new briefcase in one hand, Jim Norman thought he could almost hear it breathing. So again, like, don't do the audiobook, guys. Don't do the audiobook. But that was a fantastic passage because it helped to... Because things seemed like relatively normal-ish up to this point. And then we get this passage and we're like, okay, something bad is happening here at this high school. Something weird is going on, you know? And then Jim's class, he has like a lot of slow learners in his class. And we have a few kids in this class who seem a little bit old-fashioned in a way, and they say things that kind of triggers Jim's memory of the past. And he starts having all these nightmares, which are quite terrifying, of his brother. And then we hear about a couple of kids who end up getting killed from Jim's class. And that itself is a terrifying thought, because it's like, oh my God, like the kids are dying. Like, what's going on there? It is only a couple of kids, and every time, you know, a kid dies, a new kid is brought into this class, and then the new kid that gets brought in the class, it's just, again, reminding Jim of the death of his brother. Like, one of them has a small strawberry birthmark on his chin. He told himself that the hood who had stabbed his brother that day 16 long dead years ago would now be at least 32. His right eyebrow split with a small scar, a scar Jim knew. There could be no mistake. It was crazy. It was lunacy. But it was also a fact. 16 years ago, this kid had driven a knife into his brother. So he's looking at this kid who's just joined his class, and this kid is being weird as fuck, insane things, and he's looking at him, he's like, hang on, you killed my brother, but like, you look the same. You should be 32 right now, but you're 16? Like, what? I like when Chip came to Jim and told him about what those kids were saying, and almost like helped him in a way as well, saying that they kind of plan on taking him out. But then we have no idea what happens to Chip. They say he ran away, and it's like, oh no. I feel like Jim is kind of screwed here, because his one witness seems to be missing. So Jim ends up calling like the old detective on the case, and this old detective remembers the case, and Jim mentions some names And some of those names are familiar to the detective. However, they had died. And I got such a jump scare as well from this part. So Jim was on the phone, then he turns and said a horrid squash face plastered up against the glass, framed in two spread hands, the splayed fingers flattened white against the glass, as was the tip of the nose. It was Vinny grinning at him. I got such a jump scare. And this is when there's like no pretense anymore. Vinny and like the boys who have joined the class and are like a little bit strange are like, yeah, we've got some unfinished business. We killed your brother. We're going to kill you next. So even though they're already dead, like how is Jim going to fix this? How is he going to stop them? So I love the proactive approach that Jim took to get the like kind of ghost boys to be banished essentially. And he like sets up a stereo system in the school and he's about like, you know, get rid of them. And he performs a sacrifice on a cat. And I was like, oh, fuck you. Fuck you. Like harming animals, Jesus Christ. I kind of hope you die. Leave the animals alone. And it always seems to be bloody cats these days. Honestly, the amount of cats who have been harmed in the making of this short story collection is insane. Oh, I love the kind of like feisty impact that he makes, and he manages to get rid of them. And then we see Wayne, his brother, come back. His brother was looking down at him. Wayne, he breathed, and the face changed. It seemed to melt and run together. The eyes went yellow and a horrible grinning malignancy looked out at him. I'll come back, Jim, the cold voice whispered. So it's like, okay, the main character has solved the problem, but has he made a bigger problem? Is there something worse that's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, damn. So I gave that one a 4.5. And yeah, they're getting closer and closer to being like a 5-star, but I do give a couple of 5 stars later on. But a lot of these are just like, oh, we're so close. You know, we are so close to a 5-star short story. Another story that was so close to being a 5-star is Strawberry Spring. I really love this one as well. I thought it was so good, so effective. Great little twist at the end there as well. So we hear about Spring Heel Jack. The main character is enchanted by the dark and mist-blown Strawberry Spring, by the shadow of violent death that walked through it on the night 8 years ago, the shadow of Spring Heel Jack. So we hear about this kind of serial killer kind of person. You know how we have the idea of like the false summer? Well, this is like the false spring. It was Strawberry Spring, and on the morning of 17 March, we all knew Gail Kerman was murdered. And then we had, oh, he got another one. The guy killed somebody else last night, and now they're hunting all over for it. Looking all over for what? Her head. Whoever killed her took her head with them. Nothing scares me more, like right now especially, than real life serial killers. You know what I mean? Like they are real. They are a genuine threat. And they are so genuinely terrifying. And so many true crime cases are really getting to me the older I get. Like seriously, I've been thinking about the Idaho student murders for months now. I think about it like pretty much every single day, and I can't get out of my head because I'm genuinely terrified by it. And the idea that a real life person can do stuff like that is just the most shocking thing ever. So this is a story where we have the idea that this is a serial killer and they are killing people and nobody knows who they are and they're coming in with a spring. It's just genuinely upsetting because you also hear the paranoia of like, who is it? Who is it? There was someone dark among us, as dark as a path which twisted across the mole or wound among the 100-year-old oaks on the quad in back of the gymnasium. Like you are constantly looking over your shoulder. You don't know who's going to be next. You don't know if you're going to be next. And so yeah, the main character's like talking about all these things. They're talking about like how the murderer bears a resemblance to Jack the Ripper. Spring Heel Jack was a man, no one seemed to doubt that, but the fog was his accomplice and it was female, or so it seemed to me. More people are getting killed. Adele Parkins, Marsha Curran. Like, how is it going to stop? You know, like, it's just like genuinely a thing that just keeps happening, and it hits way too close to home. The more you're reading it, the way it like hits close to home. But then Spring Heel Jack left with the fog, left with like the whole like Strawberry Spring. But then we have like years later, you know, the main character has gotten married, has a child, got a job, and then the narrator feels that it's come back. I knew Strawberry Spring had come again. It says, this morning's paper says a girl was killed on the New Sharon campus near the Civil War cannons. My wife is upset. She wants to know where I was last night. I can't tell her because I don't remember. And I was like, okay. I mean, thinking about that foggy night when I had a headache and walked for air and passed all the lovely shadows without shape or substance. Okay, all through this story, we kind of had like the main character not knowing much. I can hear my wife as I write this in the next room crying. She thinks I was with another woman last night. And oh dear God, I think so too. He is Spring Heel Jack. The main character is the killer we've been looking for this entire time. And that again is terrifying because it's like, oh, the serial killer itself can be anyone. It can be the person right in front of your nose. You know, like serial killers in real life, or anyone who kills anyone in real life, that could be someone you know. It could be yourself. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like that is genuinely so creepy. And I love the effectiveness of that Stephen King imbued in the story, the slow reveal, the idea that this main character is only like observing and not doing anything. But by the end of the story, we realize, oh, he is the one who was doing the doing. So 4.5 for that one. A really effective one again. And I feel like I need to set my ratings a long time because, you know, when these stick out to me, I'm sure in like a year's time, I'll be able to remember these stories so vividly and clearly that I would probably end up giving some of these 5 stars instead of 4.5. I'm just very tricky to please. The next story is The Ledge. And like, I like the idea of it. And again, I like the setup. I liked the kind of, you know, descriptions in it as well. This is essentially about a man who's been forced to walk the ledge of a building because Kressner, a bit of like a mobster, bit of a mob gang member person, he finds out that the main character of the story has been sleeping with his wife, Marcia. Oh, and the main character is called Stan. So yeah, Stan and Marcia fall in love, and Kressner is not happy with it. So he makes Stan walk the entire building like on the ledge, and that's the only way he'll be able to survive and like walk away from all of this. He says, you can have my wife, you can have all this money, this and the other. I felt from the very beginning that Marcia was no longer with us. I kind of had that feeling. That's kind of like the whole like twist of this as well, is that Marcia's been dead the entire time and Stan will not be able to go back to her and stuff like that. That was kind of like the gotcha moment. And I was like, I kind of felt like I already knew that. The ledge is 5 inches wide. You'll have to inch your way along. The wind would be cold and it would cut like a knife. Like, that is scary. The idea of like having to circle a building is scary. My fear of heights would definitely, it would do a number on me for sure. But because I feel like this was framed almost as like a kind of mobster kind of story, I didn't really care that much for it, to be honest. I ended up giving this one a 2 star. Like, yes, it plays with my fear of heights. If you fell that far, you would have plenty of time to realize just what was happening, to see the wind blow in your clothes as the earth pulled you back faster and faster. You'd have time to scream a long, long scream, and the sound you made when you hit the pavement would be like the sound of an overripe watermelon. Yeah, that's scary and stuff. Oh, and then we also have like pigeons kind of acting out a character as well. Like, it seems like the pigeon is like trying to kill him, like randomly darting in his face, and it seemed like another pigeon, her husband, pecked me again and now blood was flowing. Bird was pecking raw flesh and eating it for all I knew. Pigeon pecked me again and again and again. I just feel like that's so out of character for just like pigeons to do. I just don't think they would do that. So like, that felt a little bit weird to me. Because like, this isn't a supernatural story either. This isn't about like animals attacking like the rats in Graveyard Shift and stuff like that. This is a normal, regular story of a mobster man making another man circle a building. You know, I just felt like that whole part was just like a way of just trying to make it seem a little bit more scary than it is. But he does make it. And it does take a long time, which I was like, damn, it's like really that time. Because he keeps checking the time as well. And I'm like, it's 10:48 by the time he kind of gets back. And that's a long, long time. Stan ends up getting the upper hand from Kressner and makes him do the kind of walk along. Was that a scream? I don't know. It might have been the wind. It doesn't matter. Kressner said he's never Welsh on a bed, but I've been known to. I don't know. I just didn't really care by the end because I was like, well, you know, he won the ledge thing. His girlfriend's been dead the entire time. So he got some money and now he can leave, kind of thing. And he's made the person who did that walk the ledge now. Just like, I didn't care for it that much. 2 stars. 2 stars, which again is not terrible. Oh, and then we have The Lawnmower Man. I have no idea what to think about this story. It's genuinely so freaking weird. And I love that. I love that it's weird. I did give it 3 stars because I don't know how to explain it that much. We have a guy who hires a guy to mow the... Oh, well, actually, first, it seems like we have another kind of machinery come to life thing. We have the lawnmower kill a cat. So again, we have more cat death. Harold decided to get rid of the mower because it seemed like it was just upsetting his wife and daughter too much. So he's like, let's get rid of it. And so he hires a lawnmower man to cut the grass. Sounds very, very normal, you know, your everyday thing. However, the red power mower the fat man had brought in his van was running on its own. No one was pushing it. In fact, no one was within 5 feet of it. It screamed and bellowed and farted oily blue smoke in a crazed kind of mechanical madness that made Harold feel ill with terror. Like, that on its own, pretty scary. Like, seeing a lawnmower. A lawnmower is a terrifying thing. I've seen... Is it Sinister? I've seen that scene as Sinister. I've seen the new Final Destination. I'm not a fan of lawnmowers. They do scare me. So that on its own is scary. But then we have the Lawnmower Man. And he's removed his clothes. Every stitch. He was crawling along about 5 feet behind the mower, eating the cut grass. Why? Why? Oh my gosh, like literally we have a lawnmower cutting the grass on its own. We have the guy who was supposed to be running it naked, eating it behind it, just like... It's strange. It's bizarre. And like, I'm not penalizing the story for it doing that because someone's got to write that, haven't they? It might as well be Stephen King. But I'm just like, for why? This is so random. This is so weird. And then there is a mole in the grass and the lawnmower swerves and actually goes towards it. So it actually is confirmed that it has a mind of its own. It goes after this mole. Harold saw the man's pubic hair was a rich, fertile green. So he's probably got grass for pubes as well. Oh my god. So then, yeah, we do have the main character end up getting killed by the lawnmower. And Lieutenant Goodwin comes and thinks that he got crazy with the heat. Whereas the rest of him, one of the white coats asked the bird bath. That boy says somebody chased Pocket through his own living room with a lawnmower. Can you imagine that? Just like weird. It's just so weird. I gave it 3 stars because it's like, it's not bad, but it's also one of those stories where I'm like, okay, it exists. It's there. Okay. Okay, the next story is Quitters Inc. This one was a good one. So we have Dick Morrison, and he comes across his friend Jimmy. They haven't seen each other in years, and Jimmy looks good. He looks well. He's quit smoking, and Dick is very intrigued by that. And Jimmy gives him like a card for Quitters Inc. Stop going up in smoke. Treatments by appointment. So he gives him this card of like, hey, they will definitely help you. But he mentions something about like not being able to say anything because of the contract. So that seems pretty intense as it is, but like nothing too scary, nothing too outward just yet. And so we have Dick meeting Vic. Dick and Vic. Vic is kind of working his case kind of thing, and he's making sure that Dick doesn't, go off the beaten path, that he sticks to quitting smoking. After tomorrow, you'll never smoke again. Is that right? Mr. Morrison Dunedin said solemnly, we guarantee it. Like, things like that is slowly starting to get creepy. It's like, okay, but how? How are you guaranteeing it? It just sounds like it's coming across as a little bit sinister at this point. And then Vic starts finding out more about Dick that he shouldn't be knowing. So again, like that's starting to come across as a little bit sinister and creepy. But the actual main thing of this story is just like how terrible the treatment is, kind of like how intense it is, because we see Vic show him like this rabbit that is getting like shocked and stuff. And now whenever the rabbit tries to eat, it gets shocked. So it like stops eating. So Dick is like, oh, so this is going to be like shock therapy kind of thing. Well, not quite. Not quite. If Dick has a cigarette, it's his wife who is going to get hurt instead. For the first month of the treatment, our operatives will have you under constant supervision. You'll be able to spot some of them, not all, but they'll always be with you, always. If they say you smoke a cigarette, I get a call. That idea is terrifying to me because, like, are you ever safe if you think that somebody is going to be watching you? Like he says, they're not going to be watching you all the time, but you're not going to know that. How do you know the times that they watch you and the times they don't? So they might as well be watching you 24/7 because you're not going to know about it. You know what I mean? Like things like that. But also the fact that putting his wife in danger is another like really scary idea too. Also, his son is in danger from this as well. So like the stakes just got even higher. But it really just show you the intensity of like cravings, addiction as well. Like say if somebody told me that I had to give up coffee, for instance, or if I was like trying to give up coffee and this was the kind of stuff I had to go through, oh my gosh, I would genuinely never touch coffee again. Like, that's effective, but like, it's unorthodox. It is inhumane. It's a proper 10-step punishment scale. It's awful. And also, Dick is terrible as well. Like, he calls his son awful names because his son isn't the brightest. And so he calls his son like these awful, awful names. So he's a terrible human being to begin with. But Stephen King does such a good job at showing addiction. Suddenly, he glanced around the study again. He reached in the drawer and brought out a cigarette. He caressed it, fondled it. What was that old slogan? So round, so firm, so fully packed. Truer words have never been spoken. Even though he knows the danger of doing this and what it will do to his family, that addiction is way too strong. It's scary how addiction can like take over your mind and make you do things that you kind of don't really want to do. King did a great job of conveying that. And also the fact that he does get a call because he does have that cigarette and he gets a call, he's caught. Like shit, like that sinking feeling like he genuinely cannot ever have a cigarette again. And if he does, then yeah, his wife, his son, they're going to pay the price for it. And so his wife does get like tortured for like 30 seconds, but then she understands like when he tells her about it, like, this is the price I pay if I have a cigarette. If I quit, then no one ever gets hurt again. And like, so it's definitely going to be like a thing where he quits for real. And his wife is like, it was worth it. She said, God bless these people. They've let you out of prison. So it's like, damn, like, the addiction has been that bad. It's made him into a person that's been that bad that she was okay with getting tortured for 30 seconds for the benefit of her husband. I'm like, oh my God, that's wow. I've got no words for that. And then at the end, we have Dick meeting Jimmy from the start again. and Morrison had never met his wife. She offers her hand and Morrison shakes it. There is something odd about her grip. The little finger on her right hand is missing. So Jimmy, who we met at the very start, obviously went through the program, but his wife paid the price for it as well. So she's missing a finger. So we kind of seen how that circle has come full circle again. You know what I mean? Like, we have that at the start, we come back to it at the end. That was really, really good. I really enjoyed that. I'm gonna give the story 3.5. Not my favorite. I did like what we built to. I liked all of that. But yeah, there was just like stories in this that I prefer more. But it was a very good, effective story. I will give it that. The next one is I Know What You Need. And I don't think the story knew what I needed because I didn't love it. I feel like this is the kind of story that I've seen kind of play to death a little bit, where we kind of have like the whole like voodoo kind of aspect of it, where we have a main character. She is called Elizabeth, and this guy comes up to her, I know what you need. And he kind of does know what she needs. So she's like, you need a strawberry double dip cone. And she looked at him. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she had been thinking about breaking for an ice cream. And this guy's called Ed as well, by the way. He's called Ed. Edward Jackson Hamner Jr., no less. But once he started me thinking about ice cream, I couldn't stop. So you can kind of feel from this that, oh, maybe he has like some kind of like power of suggestion or persuasion or something like that. Some kind of like psychic ability. He manages to like help her with a test. And it seems like he is wanting to have a little bit more of a relationship with her. She is in a relationship herself, Tony. Tony's pressing her for the subject of marriage. And then next thing you know, a week later, Tony was dead. So you know Ed is doing some funky, funky shit in order to get Elizabeth. And she is slowly starting to get more and more in love with Ed because he does actually know what she needs. And she even says, who are you, Ed, besides my fairy godfather? If somebody came up to me and was like knowing every part of me and knew everything I needed, then sure, I would fall hook, line and sinker for them. But it's so manipulative, and I'm so glad that her friend, Alice, kind of sees through his bullshit. She gives Elizabeth a lot of truths. She hired a private detective agency and finds out that Ed was actually part of Elizabeth's class in first grade. So there is a long history there. He hasn't been honest. Like, there's a little bit something a bit sketchy about him. But like, this felt more like a plot from Fear Street by R.L. Stine than a Stephen King short story. You know what I mean? It felt a little bit, I don't know. It didn't really do much. We find a more backstory about Ed, which I didn't really care too much for. We find that he has like a little voodoo doll of Elizabeth, and he did kill Tony, and she gets away. Like, that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else to say about this one. I just genuinely found it rather mediocre. So I'm giving it 2 stars. It's the kind of, this guy is ultimately controlling her at the end to get her love kind of thing. And I find that a little bit boring. I find that a bit of a boring premise. So I guess we do have to have some stinkers in a short story collection. Some have to come bottom right. Yeah, that one I just wasn't a huge fan of. And then we get to the main event, Children of the Corn, quite possibly the most famous short story from this collection. And again, I've never read this before. I've never seen an adaptation of it. I have no idea what the story is actually about. The only thing I think I know was that I watched a Simpsons episode that I think parodied Children of the Corn. So what I know is from that. But we have Bert and Vicky. They are driving. And I freaking love this one. I'm just going to say this right now. I gave this one 5 stars. This is the kind of story that I love. I love that we have something really sinister going on. I love the atmosphere of it. I love the isolated setting of it. I love the slow build up to it as well. Bert and Vicky, they are going through a really rough spot in their marriage. They are pretty much fighting on this drive. And then suddenly they run something over. They think it might be a dog. Oh no, it's a child. They ran over a child. Just ran straight out of all of these stalks of corn that's lining this road. Like, they can't see anything that comes in and out of it. And that itself is a scary thought to me. Like, anything could come out of this corn. You could get lost in it. So yeah, this child just ran straight out. And obviously they're like a bit worried about it. So they put this child in the trunk of the car. And they're like, okay, the next town we get to, we'll, tell the police and stuff like that. However, when they get a closer look, someone cut his throat. And that, I was like, oh my God. He didn't just like run him over. The fact that this boy's throat was cut beforehand gives you the sense that something a lot more sinister is going on. So it's not as simple as, oh, they just ran over this child and they killed him. It's not that simple. Something a lot worse is going on. So slowly we realize that Vicky and Bert have never passed anyone on the way. They haven't passed anyone since they got on that road, Route 17. They haven't passed a single person. That isolated feeling is coming back in full force. There is a radio station that comes on. Atonement, the voice bellowed. Only by the blood of the lamb are we saved. and they see like a radio tower. I think that maybe rings a bell for me from the Simpsons episode. But there's no room for the fornicator, no room for the coveter, no room for the defiler of the corn, no room for the homosexual. I was like, oh my god, if they ever found out about my corn on the cock, they will sacrifice me, no bother. But they realise the voices sound very young. So this is children saying this. And then they find in the suitcase that the dead boy had a crucifix that had been made from twists of corn husk, once green, now dry. Kernels remain formed a crude cruciform figure in yellowish bas relief. Oh my god, it's just like the visuals is terrifying. Even Vicky, who grew up like with a kind of religious trauma, is terrified of it. And yeah, it's just, it's so creepy and so eerie. They get to the town, it's empty. We're right in town bit, and there's not a car, not one car. From a block over, they heard the high and joyous laughter of children. Oh my god, like, children scare me at the best of times. Like, this is making them feel even worse. The month on view was August 1964. Like, this is a town trapped in time. It's trapped in the past. There's like a church that Bird goes into, which he shouldn't have done. Like, they should have just drove out there. Like, what a creepy ass place. So, like, he was asking for this. I don't victim blame often, but he was asking for this. His pride, again, like his stubbornness, prevents him from going straight to Vicky because he just needs to explore a little bit more. But then we have a book, and there's lots of people written in this book, and they all seem to pretty much either like die around the same year. They die around about like 19 is when they seem to like leave, or their kind of sections end abruptly. Something had happened in 1964, something to do with religion and corn and children. And so he deduces that these children got religion and they killed off their parents. Maybe they decided 19 was as old as any of them could live. And now the people who would be 19 are having children. And so like this, again, the cycle is kind of continuing. They killed all the parents, even the pregnant ones. That's what I think. And one of them got pregnant in October of 1964 and gave birth to Eve, some 16 or 17-year-old girl. Eve, the first woman. The religious like tones of that, the biblical reference, the idea that this is a town that is trapping itself in time and we have this cycle is a really terrifying thought. Vicky's blasting the horn outside. He comes out. From all around, children were coming. Some of them were laughing gaily. They held knives, hatchets, pipes, rocks, hammers. One girl, maybe 8, with beautiful long blonde hair, held a jack handle. She's 8 years old. We have rural weapons, not a single modern weapon, rural weapons, and these children are holding them. Like, they should not be holding those weapons. This is so unnatural. This feels like it should be against God, you know? This should be against society. This should be... But they are coming, they are dragging Vicky out, they have murderous intent in their eyes, and I love when Bird has to like run, and he has to run through the corn, and it's like a maze, and he gets lost, and it's so atmospheric, it is so intriguing, it's kind of terrifying. He was in the corn and it closed behind him, and over him like the waves of a green sea taking him in. Even like that kind of reference felt a little bit biblical to me too. Comes across a large circle of bare earth, and there Vicky was, kind of like almost crucified in a way. She'd been mounted on a crossbar like a hideous trophy, her arms held at the wrists and her legs at the ankles with twists of common barbed wire. Her eyes had been ripped out. The sockets were filled with the moonflakes of cornstalk. So not only does she have this like image of like Jesus Christ on the cross, but also like a scarecrow. The children wouldn't venture in the corn at night. This was the place of he who walks behind the rows. All the rows had closed up, and now he was trapped. And obviously, like, he doesn't survive. So we have another main character who doesn't make it. Children in the corn stood in the clearing at midday, looked at the 2 crucified skeletons and the 2 bodies. The bodies were not skeletons yet, but they would be. We have Isaac, who is only 9, but he's almost like a prophet. He's much displeased with the sacrifice. And the children are making sobbing noises. It doesn't kind of like humanize them too much because they are doing awful things, but it makes you understand why they're doing it a bit. This person that they have to sacrifice to isn't happy. Now the age of favor has lowered from 19 to 18. And so now anyone who is 19 must walk into the corn and be sacrificed. And that night, all of those now above the age of favor walked silently into the corn and went to the clearing to gain the continued favor of he who walks behind the rows. And now it was well pleased. What a sinister, terrifying ending to that story. 5 stars. Like, I genuinely loved it. I thought it was great. I would have read, again, like a full-length version of this too. And I don't know if maybe that's like such a stereotypical answer for me to say, oh, Children in the Corn was 5 stars. I don't know if maybe everyone loves this story or think it's overrated. I genuinely thought it was good and effective, okay? My very first time reading it or consuming this kind of story of Children of the Corn. And I thought was fantastic. Moving on to the last rung on the ladder. This one was more of a sad one. Like, it was a really, really sad story. I gave this one 3 stars. We have Katrina and we have Larry. Larry is like the protagonist of the story. Katrina is his sister. And when they were younger, they would have this like massive like shed thing or barn thing that had a ladder that they would, you know, jump from like the ledge into like the hay down below. They would take turns doing that. They would have a lot of fun doing that. However, it was like really dangerous. The ladder nailed to a crossbeam high up in the 3rd loft, a ladder that went straight down to the main barn floor, forbidden to climb on it. And despite that, the dad never did anything about it. So like all of this is the dad's fault, I'm just saying. Jump off the beam and fall 70 feet straight down. It was a forbidden sport, all right. So they would have fun doing that all the time. He was 10 that year and Kitty was 8. And there was an incident where the ladder kind of broke and Kitty was like hanging on and she ended up like having to fall. But like her brother managed to put like so much hair there that it kind of broke her fall. So he kind of saved her. And he tells her, I will always be there to catch you kind of thing. And so he's relieved that she is alive because he helped break her fall. And the fucking dad, he says, every time I whack you, Larry, I want you to thank God your sister is still alive. It's the dad's fault anyway. If you ask me, it's the dad's fault for not getting rid of that ladder in the first place. He knew it was dangerous and he still kept it there. And he's the one taking out, oh my God, the dad should have died, I'm just saying. Anyway, Kitty says, you're my big brother, I knew you'd take care of me. Like, she jumped out of blind faith because she didn't know that he was, you know, helping or anything. And so we find out that now in the present day, it's like years and years later, Larry's carrying around a newspaper clipping saying, Call Girl Swan dives to her death. And we find out that that was Kitty. So in the present day, Kitty has jumped off a building and she died. And so it brings Larry back to when they were kids and they were jumping off the thing. And he said that he would always kind of catch her. Yeah, Larry, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and what I've decided is that it would be better for me if that last rung had broken before he could pull the hair down. And Larry also talks about the fact that there was so much distance between them now, because, you know, he got a good job, he barely ever visited, in fact, he hadn't seen her in years, and Kitty was like, oh, you should come over, like, you should come see me, and stuff like that, and he never did. So there is, like, this really heartbreaking side to the story, that this brother kind of didn't give his sister any attention anymore, and they grew so far apart. And she was the one who always knew the hair would be there. And yet when she jumped and she died, he wasn't there. And that is just like a heartbreaking thing. It wasn't scary or anything like that. It wasn't anything like that, but it was very well written. And it did pull at my heartstrings. Like 3 stars is still pretty good. So The Man Who Loved Flowers, I have given 3 stars, but I would probably lower it to a 2.5. But again, I'm going to sit with all my ratings, my initial ratings, because this one was a little bit too much like Strawberry Spring in a way. So we have the main character, he's a young man, and he has like this massive smile on his face, and everyone he passes like kind of smiles back at him. They love the way he looks, and they're like, oh, you know, he must be in love, you know, and young love does this to you, and he's got so much love in his heart, and it's having this effect on everyone, being more positive and smiley. We randomly hear as well on the radio, there is a hammer murderer on the loose. There was an unidentified woman who'd been pulled from the East River. None of it seemed to matter because he was just so happy, and he was just skipping down the road. He's passing a bakery, and then he passes a flower stand, and we have the main character turn back to the flower stand smiling. He would bring her some flowers that would please her. He knew they were Norma's favourite. So again, we have another Norma. Oh my gosh, what is this obsession with the Norma? So this guy gets the flowers, and then he is coming down, and he's skipping down a narrow lane, and I wasn't really 100% sure what would happen here. But he does come down this lane. The tone seems to shift a little bit. The young man was alone now. And he comes across this woman. He's like, Norma! She looked up and smiled. But as they drew together, the smile faded. I brought you flowers, he said. She looked at them for a moment. Thank you, but you're mistaken. My name is Norma, he whispered, and pulled the short-handled hammer out of his coat pocket. There for you, Norma. It was always for you, all for you. So she backed away with terror. And she wasn't Norma. Norma was dead. She'd been dead for 10 years, and it didn't matter because she was going to scream, and he swung the hammer to stop the scream, to kill the scream. She was a Norma, so he swung the hammer, as he had done 5 other times. So as it turns out, the main character is the killer, like in Strawberry Spring, and he's just killing random women because Norma, the love of his life, I think, was the love of his life, died 10 years before. And then, yeah, this main character, he comes bouncing and is skipping out, and another couple sees him, and they smile, and it's like, young love, you know, I get it. It can be effective, I guess. I could see, again, what Stephen King was doing. I didn't really care much for the story, especially since we already had Strawberry Spring, where the twist was essentially the same thing. But now, getting into my second 5-star of this collection, and that is one for the road. Yes, I gave this one 5-star. Yes, it is to do with Salem's Lot. And oh, I freaking love Salem's Lot so much. And I love the atmosphere of this one so much. I love the setting. I love the stormy, snowy, freezing cold atmosphere that this story sets. We have Herb, we have Tookie, they're in the bar. And then this random man comes in and he's begging for help because, you know, his wife and child are in a car and it's been abandoned. And it was abandoned near Salem's Lot. My wife, my daughter, he collapsed on the floor in a dead fiend. They're out there in the storm. You came 6 miles through the storm? Like, amazing. And so they're asking him, oh, did you see a sign, like, where you left them? And yes, he mentions the lot. And Tookie is like, the lot? Oh, my God. And so that drop of dread. Because, no, you don't go near the lot. Terrible things happen at the lot. They might as well be dead. What's this town, Jerusalem's Lot? Why was the road drifted in and no lights on whatsoever? Jerusalem's Lot burned out 2 years back. So this is set after Salem's Lot. So the first story in this collection, Jerusalem's Lot, was set, you know, like 100 years before, essentially. And then this one is set 2 years after. Again, I need a whole Salem's Lot cinematic universe. And they're putting out crucifixes and taking the Bibles. And they're going into the snow. They're going to help. The main blizzard, ever been out in one? The snow comes flying so thick and fine that it looks like sand and sounds like it beating on the sides of your car or pickup. I love the visuals. I love the description of it. I love, again, how isolated it makes them feel. They're literally driving into death. They're driving for it. They see a deer, but the deer's eyes were red. They get to the car, but they're not there. Oh my God, what happened to his wife and child? And they explain that Jerusalem's Lot is full of vampires. And this is when it kind of not exactly hits in just yet, but they see his wife. She looked up at us and grinned, and when she did, I felt my longing, my yearning turn to horror, as cold as the grave, as white and silent as bones in a shroud. There was sullen red glare in her eyes. She wasn't human anymore. And so the guy who was after his wife and child, he's gone. And then our two protagonists get to the car. This is when they see the little girl, and she is standing on top of the snow. She was going to be 7 for an eternity of nights. That's heartbreaking. That's so sad. Didn't want to, but there was nothing I could do. I was leaning forward, my arms outstretched. I could see her mouth opening. I could see the little fangs inside the pink ring of her lips. So Booth almost died there, but Herb helps him, threw a Bible at her. And then we get back to Booth. He says, that was some time ago. I'm a slight older now, and I was no chicken then. Herb passed on 2 years ago. So he's telling this story. And whatever you do, don't go up that road to Jerusalem's Lot, especially not after dark. There's a little girl somewhere out there, and I think she's still waiting for a goodnight kiss. I probably didn't explain exactly like how much I enjoyed the story, but I really did. I just found it so exciting, and I love the idea of them having to go back to Jerusalem's Lot to help this guy. And like they were actually like good protagonists as well, even though it was a dumb idea to go back there knowing what they know. But they were good people, and I like reading good people in Stephen King stories. Like sometimes they are very rare to read about. And so when they get there and all of that chaos happens and it's just so awful and sad, I just love the setting so much. I really do. 5 stars. I think this is my favorite story from the collection. Maybe it edges Children of the Corn. I'm not 100% sure. It's probably a fight between this one and that one for my favorite story from this collection. But it was just so freaking good. Like I really did. I just loved pretty much everything about it. You know, when you just like really enjoy something so much that you have all the positive things to say about it, but you can't quite explain all the things that you loved about it. So that was probably like a really shit review. I just loved it. I just freaking loved it. It was so good. So coming to the last story of this collection, The Woman in the Room. Again, this was another heartbreaking story. It was more sad than anything else, more tragic. And it plays on the fear of kind of like losing a parent before your eyes, but also like putting your parent out of her misery, essentially. Putting your mum out of her misery. That's essentially what this entire story has to deal with from the main character. Because we start the story off saying, the question is, can he do it? Do what exactly? And we see that his mum is suffering. She's in a hospital bed and she is suffering. And so he's trying to grapple with the idea of putting her out of her misery in the story. And it's just sad. It's just genuinely so sad. Also, I played on my fear of aging too. Because the patients, all the patients are pretty much elderly. And he says the patients remind him of a horror movie called The Night of the Living Dead. It almost makes me feel like, oh, the older we get, the more zombie-like we become. And that is kind of a terrifying thought. That's not really embellished or elaborated on in this story, but it's like that one line that made me think of like how much we change as we get older and how much we have to rely, I guess, on other people to look after us when we get to a certain age. And that's really heartbreaking. It's really, really sad. Nothing moving except for her eyes, but straight inside her body, something is moving in there. It's like she's lost so much of herself and there's not really much left of her. I think I'm crying. I don't mean to cry in front of you. Oh, it's just like tragic. It's so sad. I had lived 60 years so my son could hold my cigarettes for me. I don't mind. I also find it like morbidly poetic when he's talking about like the cancer that's in her. So the cancer now in her began in the womb, like a second child, his own darker twin. His life and her death began in the same place. That's a fantastically written line, and one that just it just presents so many ideas to you that yes, she gave him life, but in doing so, she now has to like suffer death from that same area. In a way, it just feels like such a beautifully written moment. And yeah, just like the last couple of pages, it's just sad. He gives her the pills. There seems to be a bit of a silent understanding between them. I don't really know what else to say about it other than it's just so freaking tragic. It's sad. It's a reality of life, and it's hard to confront that sometimes. But I will only give this one 2 out of 5. It's just genuinely not one of my favorites in the story collection. Not one I would ever reread, but I totally understand where King was coming from when he was writing it, you know? So yeah, so that also means that my average for Night Shift is a 3.38 out of 5, which if I rounded it, it would only be a 3-star if I rounded it down to that. But my gut instinct and for everything and how much I actually enjoyed this collection, I'm actually going to give this collection 4 stars. There are some of my favorite short stories in this, and I don't often read short story collections. I'm not a big anthology reader, but this was definitely, yeah, probably like the best short story collection I've ever read. Again, I haven't read many of them, but this one is most likely my favorite one. So even though the average is 3.38 for now, because again, certain story ratings might change and they might go up, they might go down, it's probably more like a 3.5 for like the individual story average. But in my heart, it's a 4-star. I really like this one. And oh my god, I was torn about it for so long. I'm so sorry. I have finished different seasons, and as a footnote, I have not seen any adaptation of any of the stories within this. So I have not seen Shawshank Redemption, I have not seen Stand By Me, I have not seen Apt Pupil, and I don't even know if the breathing method has been adapted. It probably hasn't been because it's a bit of a strange one. But yeah, I just want to preface that these stories are completely new to me as well. Same with Night Shift, everything was completely brand new. So let's talk about Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. So I initially thought Rita Hayworth was like the co-author of the story, because I'm pretty sure there is a separate version of the story that I could buy, so I don't have to get it in this collection. You can actually get the novella on its own. And every single time I've seen Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, for some reason I just thought that Rita Hayworth was the co-author. But then I forgot, yeah, Rita Hayworth is an old Hollywood star, right? Because I remember the song Vogue from Madonna, and she sings something about Rita Hayworth, give good face, something like that. So it's like, I know who Rita Hayworth is. And as I read this, I obviously like know the importance behind Rita Hayworth. But this one follows Red. He has given us a story, and he's talking about, you know, being in Shawshank, which is a penitentiary and jail where people, you know, criminals go. Although we actually end up meeting Andie, and he swears by his innocence. And I wasn't exactly sure where the story would go, honestly, but I will say I really liked Andie pretty much straight away. And I got so heavily invested in Andie's story pretty much straight away, more so than Red, who is our narrator. With Red, he admits to committing murder. So he's the kind of main character where, okay, like he's done something really awful, and he is paying for it in jail, which is where he does belong. So it's a bit of a strange one as you're reading this, because he did take a life. In fact, he took 3 lives. He only planned on killing his wife. It was premeditated. Fixed the brakes on her Chevrolet Coupe, her father had given us as wedding present, except he hadn't planned that the neighbor woman and the neighbor woman's infant son would also be picked up in that same car, and all 3 of them would die. So he is a main character who he has killed 3 people. One of them was an infant. And so in my eyes, he definitely should never ever be out of jail. But yet we have this story where he comes across in such a humane way, and he is like dare I say, like a likable person. Obviously he didn't intend to kill 3 people, but he did. And I kind of love the fact that he says, given a second chance, I would not do it again, but I'm not sure that means I am rehabilitated. So it does go into like the ethics of, you know, prisoners and what they're in for, and kind of the treatment that they get too. There is like such a difference between the main character, Red, and Andie. And yet we have one innocent person, one guilty person. And yet I kind of like them both, which honestly, me saying that out loud is genuinely so like weird to me, because I just never think I would ever feel like a murderer is likable. So even though this story is not like a horror, it's not a thriller, Nothing like that. It's more like a drama. I'm horrified at myself for liking the main character, Red, because I shouldn't. I condemn what he did. And yet, Stephen King had such a way of writing him as like such a great character to follow, as well as like his observations of Andie and kind of bridging the gap between us, the reader, and the inmates, and Andie in particular. I kind of liked what he did with that, and that is why I'm like so conflicted. Like, I shouldn't like this murderer, but I kind of do. You know, oh God, at least he's fictional. You know, I don't like real life murderers, okay? I'm just putting that out there because I feel like I need a disclaimer. But with Andie, Red says, in all my years at Shawshank, there have been less than 10 men whom I believed when they told me they were innocent. Andie Dufresne was one of them. And so I kind of like that that was kind of confirmed pretty much at the start. I mean, to be fair, maybe he could have done. Maybe Andie could have been lying and he could have been a very good liar about it. But at the same time, when there's like a little bit of like an investigation into it and we see more of like what happened, there is like the suggestion that the police kind of forced some like witnesses to say something, especially when it comes to like the dishcloths, like the dish rag things that was used to like muffle the sound of the gunshots. There is like a little bit of a suggestion that maybe the police were just like wanting someone to be, you know, put in jail for it. And that does happen in real life, you know? So I feel like there is enough ambiguity in the writing to let you come up with your own theories and make your own decisions on whether or not Andie is innocent. But I do think firmly that Andie is innocent. I haven't seen the movie, I promise. I don't know anything about the movie. And so when he asks for a rock hammer, because Red is able to smuggle things in, he's able to like get things somehow. Like, we never really get to fully see how he does it, but he's able to get other inmates the things that they kind of want. So Andie asked for a rock hammer, and that was when I was like, I think he's going to try a jailbreak or something, or he's going to like hammer his way through the wall or something just to like get out. But that was like the first inkling. Like, I wasn't 100% sure, because even Red is like, oh, it would take you like 1,000 years to use that tiny rock hammer to hammer your way through a wall. And so that did kind of move me away from that theory. And we just continue to get more of like a life inside of this prison. We find out about the sisters, bull queers, or jailhouse sussies. And it says stuff like there are men who get turned in prison. In the current parlance, they go gay or come out the closet. And then there are the sisters. Their prey is the young, the weak, and the inexperienced, or as in this case of Andie, hunting grounds are the showers. Like, it sounds genuinely god-awful. So you do see, and I'll not like exactly repeat exactly what happens or like how it's described or anything, but you do see dignity and you see humanity being ripped away. And honestly, people who are in jail who deserve to be in jail, a lot of times I'm like, sure, like if you are a R-worder, if you are a murderer, if you hurt and harm innocent people, then I don't care what happens to you in prison, quite honestly. But the way that it's described in this is genuinely so uncomfortable. It is peeling back like humanity, like the face of humanity. And it's like there are genuinely people who do not deserve that. And yet it seems like the people who don't deserve it are the ones it happens to. So it's kind of sad. And then Andie also asked for a Rita Hayworth poster. And I didn't make a connection there. I didn't make the connection that he would be hammering the wall behind it or anything. But I like this imagery. So it says, but in the bright morning sunlight, there were dark slashes across her face, the shadow of the bars on his single slit window. And when he's talking about what this poster means to him, he gave me a peculiar surprise sort of look. Why, they mean the same thing to me as they do to most cons, I guess. Freedom. You look at those pretty women and you feel like you could almost, not quite, but almost step right through and be beside them, be free. And obviously that is like a massive clue that there's going to be a tunnel right behind it. But yeah, I kind of loved the metaphorical sense of that as well. What she represented to him and what it represents to other inmates who can't be free and can't get out. You have the poster of someone who maybe you look up to, or maybe just someone who represents the outside world. And it's kind of that losing yourself in seeing someone like that in being free. There's also obviously the seedier side of that where, you know, guys have needs and they see a beautiful woman on the wall and they will do things to that. There's obviously that side of it as well. But I'm choosing to look at the beauty of what Andie has just said about freedom and being free, but also how on the nose that was as well. That, hey, you could almost like reach out and, you know, be beside them kind of thing. Yeah, that is because there is now going to be a tunnel right behind her. You know what I mean? Oh, and I hated Samuel Norton as well. So we get introduced to another warden, Samuel Norton, and Andie helps him quite a lot. And yet Norton is kind of against Andie and Andie kind of being free and what he can do to be free. And Andie's like, why? And Norton's like, because people like you make me sick. I like you right where you are, Mr. Dufresne. And as long as I'm warden here at Shawshank, you are going to be right here. You say you used to think that you were better than anyone else. I've gotten pretty good at seeing that on a man's face. And it's like, the way that Andie reacts and he's like, but it's my life. This is my life. And you realize the amount of time that's passing by, like that is time he will never get back. And it breaks my heart to think of innocent people who lose their lives from that because they've been accused of a crime they did not commit or stuff like that, like in the case of Andie. And it's been 19 years since Red gave him the rock hammer, so he asked for a new one. 19 years. Like, you don't realize just like how quickly that time goes. And that's something I really like about the writing of Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, is the time just kind of slips away. And then the narrator will mention a date, and then you'll realize, oh my God, it's been like 10 years since then. It goes by in the blink of an eye, essentially, and you're wasting away. You're seeing the changes in these inmates. And this, again, is time that they cannot get back. And you have someone like Norton who doesn't care. He just sees them all as, you all deserve to be here. You all deserve to not be treated like human beings. And so, like, I don't care if you're innocent or not. I'm going to prevent you from thinking you're above your station, essentially. Like, that power that is behind Norton is genuinely disgusting. And I also kind of love how out of nowhere comes when the narrator says, in 1975, Andie Dufresne escaped from Shawshank. It was just like that one line. We don't even see him do this in that moment. We do get a little bit later Red explaining how he got out. But in this moment, you know, everything seems to be, you know, going routinely in this place. And then, yeah, in 1975, Andie Dufresne escaped from Shawshank. Just like that, out of nowhere. He hasn't been recaptured, and I don't think he ever will be. In fact, I don't think Andie Dufresne even exists anymore. And that's because, you know, he's gotten like this fake ID and stuff. I liked hearing about all of the things that went into it, and like the escape itself, all of that time and effort that went into it, explaining the drywall or the plaster and stuff and how easy it was to actually kind of do and like break through. It wouldn't take you 100 or 1,000 years, but it takes a lot of motivation, and the wall wasn't as strong, and it leads to this, that, and the other. And Andie also had this like fake ID set up, and he put it behind this rock kind of thing. There was a lot of over explaining to try and make it feel, I think, believable. And while I wouldn't have really questioned the believability of it, the more and more Stephen King went on trying to explain how he escaped and the kind of ID that he got and the money that he'd saved up and this, that, and the other, there was a lot of over explaining, I think, to try and make me believe it. In doing so, it kind of bored me a little bit, because I was like, I do believe you. I believe that this could have happened. I don't really need to have this explanation that just drones on and on and on. And that's why I'm giving the story 3.5 out of 5 and nothing more than that. Like, it's a very good story, and I genuinely think it's beautifully written. I think Stephen King did a fantastic job with it, but it's not really my cup of tea, essentially. And it was more like drama than anything else, which I do think we're going to get more of in Stephen King's later bibliography. So I'm going to have to get used to this. But like, I think it was rather simple in a way, like beautifully written, but in a simple way. And the story itself felt a little bit simple. You know, we have someone escape in prison, essentially. That's essentially what this story, this novella, this 132-page novella is, Andie getting out, which is honestly fine, genuinely honestly fine. But like, I don't know, like, I didn't take too much out of it by the end of it. There is definitely a lot of themes underneath this to talk about, you know, people's innocence and when they are falsely accused and they have to pay for that in the lengths that they will go to escape that is, you know, partly heartbreaking as well, because again, that's like time people can't get back. And that in itself is a true horror, because we only have the one life, and to waste it is genuinely upsetting. But yeah, I did like that we had a bit of a hopeful, uplifting ending as well. But at the same time, I'm like, but you killed 3 people. Like, you should stay in that prison. I'm just saying, like, as much as I like you, Red, and you seem like a pretty decent guy in there, and you were very helpful and handy, like, the fact that he might have the potential of a new life at the very end of this, which, you know, he's done his time, I guess. But when I think you've killed 3 people, that should be 3 life sentences and you should never get out. So I don't know what that says about me. But like, it was a nice, hopeful, uplifting ending. Absolutely. But I just don't know if I kind of wanted Red to have that option at the end, because I don't know, does he deserve it? I don't know. Like, that's actually a good question. Does Red deserve redemption? Shawshank Redemption. Does he deserve it? I don't know. That might be a little bit controversial for me to say. But again, I'm conflicted. I am conflicted over Red. I don't know 100% what my thoughts are. Does he deserve to be free? Does he deserve that hopeful, uplifting ending despite what he's done? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. The intrigue definitely kept me going with this story, but I think for a lot of it as well, I was a little bit bored. But hey, 3.5 is still fantastic in my eyes, so please keep that in mind. This is not a bad story at all, and I do absolutely want to check out the movie now. I honestly went into Apt Pupil not expecting it to get under my skin the way it did. Out of all of the stories, well, other than the Breathe the Method, I knew of The Body, I knew of Shawshank Redemption, but I didn't know anything about Apt Pupil, so I was starting to read this one. We followed Todd. He's like 13, I think, at the very start, and he knocks on this old man's door, who is called Mr. Denker, and Todd ends up like being like a little creepy shit, and is kind of like, I know you're a Nazi war criminal, in a way. Like, it's said a lot better than that. Well, the ball doesn't drop quite that quickly, at least to the reader. Like, Todd has gone there knowing who he is, and Mr. Denker was like, no, that's not me, couldn't be me. I'm not this Kurt Descender person, Bobby, that you're accusing me of. He's like very adamant about it, and honestly, when that started, I was like, well, I don't know what's going on here. Like, is he not? In the way that Mr. Denker is like, this is my backstory, like, this is not me. And then he goes to pick up the phone, and then he puts the phone down. A boy, he breathed. A boy. Todd smiled widely, but rather modestly. How did you find out? And I was like, oh my God. Like, we actually have this Nazi war criminal, and this young boy has figured it out. And the thing that really creeped me out about Todd straight away, though, was instead of saying anything to anyone, he just wants to know all the gory, nasty details of Mr. I'm just going to call him Kurt. He just wants to know all the dirty, awful, horrible things that Kurt did in Germany during World War II. And it's the most uncomfortable thing because Kurt did some of the worst things imaginable, but the way that Todd is kind of, what did he say? It's like, yeah, he grooves off that stuff. I really groove on all that concentration camp stuff. Groove, I get off on it. I'm interested. Like, it's one thing to have an interest in history, but the way that Todd goes on about it pretty much straight away is so uncomfortable. Like, it genuinely was getting under my skin. I was like, okay, so this kind of story that we're getting, we're going to have two main characters of the story. Both of them are terrible people, and they're going to be awful people to follow. I gave the story 4.5 because I think out of so many Stephen King stories that I've read, this is the one that's really, really, really gotten under my skin and upset me. There's particularly two scenes that really are awful, genuinely like so awful, and I'll probably never forget them. But going back to Todd's great interest in it all, in the way that he has been shadowing Kurt, and he's known for a little while, and Kurt has been living absolutely a lovely life in America and has gone under the radar and no one's really figured it out. And that's obviously scary because that most likely did happen for a lot of war criminals. So that in itself is a real life horror story. They did some of the worst things humans could ever do to one another, and they're just like living life normally. So obviously was not a fan of Kurt to begin with, and then Todd was just slowly starting to creep me the hell out. The way that he was just kind of spiraling more and more into the gory, nasty details. But I kind of love that characterization that Stephen King did, because he is just a young boy, essentially. Like, he's 13, so he's still on the cusp of childhood, and yet the way he talks is so sinister and so scary. Like, Todd scared me so much during this. The way he just smiles at him, the way that he's kind of just so giddy at hearing all of this awful stuff. I mean, Stephen King doesn't like 100% go into like a lot of the gory details of, the concentration camps and stuff, but you do get a good sense of Kurt's belonging there and what Kurt did. And when Todd is saying, oh, I want to hear all about all of this, like the firing squads, the gas chambers, the ovens, everything, like he lists off all the things he's interested in, and Kurt says, you are a monster. Todd sniffed, according to the books I read for my report, you're the monster. I mean, yes, 100% Kurt is a monster. 1,100,000,000% should pay for his crimes. Todd, though, definitely getting there as well. It's one thing, again, to have his specialist interest. My specialist interest is the Titanic. I am deeply fascinated by it. But there's a line, and there are true crime cases that I'm fascinated by as well. But I would never want to, toe that line between like what makes us human and what doesn't make us human. And so, like, again, like Todd can represent the people in real life who are interested in these nasty, gory, dark parts of human history, and he gets off on it. Like, who gets off on that other than psychopaths? Todd smiled enough for both of them. What? Like, why are you smiling? Like, if you were doing a history report and you need to learn more about it, I can imagine you would get such an interest and insight into it from Kurt there. But, like, turn him in. You know what I mean? But what Todd ends up doing is, again, so fucked up. He's pretty much forcing Kurt to share these stories. Even Kurt's like, I don't want to talk anymore. But Todd is like, you're going to tell me more or I'm going to tell people. Enough for today, please. My throat is sore, Kurt said. You shouldn't smoke so much then, Todd said. Tell me more about the uniforms. Which, inmate OSS, smiling, Todd said both. And then it just goes on and on into the cover stories that Todd has to tell his parents. Again, like, his parents think he is a normal all-American boy. He is just, you know, a run-of-the-mill teenage boy who was growing up so well and he's doing so well at school, at least to begin with. And they are bamboozled by the fact that their son is psychotic. And it's so scary, again, like how easy people can blend into human society and you think they're a normal person, an all-American boy. Turns out, though, that they are hiding so much of this dark shit under them. Oh, like, there is, like, a really uncomfortable description, I guess, of the gas chambers here in, like, chapter 4 kind of thing. I don't really want to get too much into that, but it was, like, very effective at conveying the horror as well. I think Stephen King did a good job with that. And there's a moment when Todd's dad sees anger behind Todd's eyes, but he dismisses it because he's like, well, Todd's never looked like that before. Todd is a normal all-American boy. I must have been saying things. So again, it's like turning a blind eye to the signs of, like, your child who you would never ever expect to be the way that they are, to have a kind of anger in them. And so you'll dismiss it. You'll be like, nah, it was probably just my imagination. And then it got so uncomfortable again when Todd got an SS uniform, which is essentially what Kurt wore during the war, and Todd is demanding for him to put it on, for Kurt to put it on. He's like, put it on, I'm going to tell people. And so Kurt reluctantly puts it on, and Kurt realizes that he is Todd's prisoner. So there's a bit of a role reversal there, but then Todd's like, straighten your cap, soldier, about face, march, I said. He starts acting like a spoiled child playing with a toy soldier, but he's doing that with an actual Nazi. An actual Nazi war criminal. And he's forcing him to put on this uniform, shouting orders at him as if he himself was Hitler. And it's the most uncomfortable exchange ever. Kurt didn't want to do it at first, but he pivots neatly. He willed again. He's actually like going back into that role so easily and so comfortably. Even though he said he didn't want to do it to begin with, he does start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he actually kind of likes it. So he's stepping back into that awful, awful role, and the power that gives Todd. Oh my gosh. Again, like, I just kept getting sickened and sickened the more that I read. And so Kurt ends up putting on the uniform as pajamas, and that helps him with his nightmares. And it's, again, like, a lot of this story made me speechless. Like, I don't know what I want to say about this other than it's just really fucking weird. It's really fucking weird. And then one of the worst things I've ever read, and I don't want to go into detail about this because, you know, trigger warnings for pet death. But this is, like, actually genuinely upsetting and awful. And as an owner of 2 cats as well, this was one of the hardest things to read. So I'm not going to go into detail about this, but if you've read this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's when Kurt grabs the cat and puts it in the oven. Like, I can't even tell you. I can't even scrub that from my mind. It's the same with It. There was a scene with that little shit, and there's like a part with a tot. I can't even talk about, like, this is genuine horror. Like that. Oh my gosh. I never want to read it, and I never want to think of it. And yet Stephen King makes me confront that. And it's the worst thing you could possibly do to me. Genuinely. I hated it. It's page 200 and 201 of this different seasons edition, by the way. If you want to refer to it, if you want to read it yourself, or if you want to skip it when you do read it, oh my god, I genuinely... And it's that comparison again with the oven, and obviously what happened at the concentration camps, and this as well. It's just, it's like, I don't enjoy the story. I don't like this story in that sense. I give it a 4.5 because, by God, is it not the most effective when it comes to getting under your skin. Yeah, you start to see the deterioration again of Kurt and Todd. They're both on this like downward spiral. They both start killing homeless people, and it just like leads to so much bloodbath. And they're so intricately linked now, like they cannot escape one another. And, you know, Todd can't just escape Kurt because Kurt knows things, and obviously Todd knows who Kurt really is. So they're intricately linked. So I do love the fact that both these characters now can't escape one another, and they both have the same trajectory. So they're killing people. They hate one another so much. We're in this together, sink or swim. I will drag you down, boy. I promise you that. If anything comes out, everything will come out. That's my promise to you. And so there was like a really funny ish. Well, not funny, but like, it kind of reminded me of, That's So Raven, when Raven pretends to be her mother when she gets called into school. That's kind of what's happening with Todd. Todd is failing his school and the teacher wants to meet his parents. But what Todd does is send in Kurt, who pretends to be his grandfather. And that was like one of the first major mistakes that they did, because what I love about the story is that neither Todd nor Kurt get away with what they've been doing. And so it feels like karma injustice at the end. But this was just one of their many fatal mistakes that they make. Like, they over-explain everything again. Like, they say and explain like their decisions on things and like how they're going to bamboozle his parents and stuff like that, with like how much time they spend together. This whole scenario with, Kurt pretending to be Todd's grandfather, it was so well done. Like, he's such a good actor. Absolutely. But also just made me think of That's So Raven. So like, that was a little bit funny. But that just shows you as well, like, some of the worst people can absolutely come across as, like a genuine grandfather or an all-American boy. And that is one of the scariest things ever. It's just like how normal people can come across as when they actually aren't. And the next kind of scene that really, I think, is like one of the worst scenes. And this is honestly, this might get me in trouble as well, but this borders, in my opinion, on child pornography. Because, with the scene in It, this also, I think, borders on that too. And I don't like it. It's definitely horrifying because Todd has a wet dream and he pictures himself doing something to a Jewish girl, and that gets him off. Again, so uncomfortable to read. Hated reading it, but it's explained a lot more. Like, in It, I don't think that scene is described in the way that it's described in this, where I do think that this is actually probably a worse example in Stephen King's writing of something that just borders too closely to what I've just said. I didn't like it. Like, I don't need to read about a child doing this. And he's under 16 at this point. I don't know how old he is, but just all of this description was too much. It was unnecessary. Again, like, I didn't need to hear about this. And again, I'm not penalizing the story too much for it, because again, like, that's horror and, stuff like that. So I do think there is a fine line. But like, personally, for me, that was too much. And I don't think it was needed. And it was just another example of, I think, a little bit of inappropriate writing when it comes to stuff like that happening. It was just too described. If it was just like telling me what he was dreaming about without describing certain things and certain areas and certain feelings and stuff like that, then, I would totally understand still. Like, you could convey still the horror of that situation, of what he's actually dreaming about, without actually describing that. You know what I mean? Like, there was just, I personally think there was no need. Feel free to disagree. So yeah, the story did get pretty exciting. It did get overtly long. And yeah, we just kind of see the unraveling. I don't need to kind of rehash the plot or the summary or anything like that. That's not what I do the Stephen King videos for, just to give you my thoughts. So I don't need to give a breakdown of everything that's happening. But I did like the fact that Kurt ended up taking his own life, because he's pretty much being caught at this point and he's in hospital. He's had a heart attack. And it felt like finally, everything was unraveling. And I loved when things started to unravel, because I was like, finally, they are going to get justice. And while I would say Kurt definitely deserved worse, I'm still glad that he was found out, Oh, I also love that Spring-Heeled Jack was mentioned as well, a little serial killer in Night Shift, the Night Shift short story collection. I love that reference. But yeah, seeing all the lies come out and people realizing who they are and who they were, and Todd as well. Like, Todd doesn't get away with it too. He ends up killing the teacher who Kurt pretended to be the grandfather, because the teacher found it out and figured it out through a newspaper article where you could see Todd's actual real grandfather. It's like, hey, hang on. And anyway, it turned out that the person who pretended to be his grandfather turned out to be a war criminal. Like, what's going on here? So I did really like the ending when Todd is confronted, and Todd is totally given into his impulses, because during this story as well, another thing that made me uncomfortable was how Todd kind of wanted to take his parents' life, and he kept thinking about the gun and stuff like that. And at the very end, he feels like he's king of the world because he's just shot and killed his teacher, and he goes on a bit of a spree, which we don't ever see, we don't really hear about, because it all happens pretty much at the very end, and we just hear at the end of the story. It was 5 hours later and almost died before they took him down. And that was it. Like, that was kind of it. Like, he's not glorified for his actions at the end there. It's just completely and utterly finished. Like, that is the end of it. That is the end of Todd. It's the end of Kurt as well. Boom. Like, they both had karma and they're gone. And honestly, it's just like, it's one of those really hard and difficult stories to really fully convey your feelings, because it just really did get under my skin. And that's one of the reasons why I gave it 4.5. And I think it is my favorite story from different seasons, because what I want from horror, what I wanted from this, was everything that Apt Pupil kind of gave me. It gave me more than I wanted as well, but as a reader, I kind of just have to like consume what Stephen King writes and just like accept it for what it is. And whether or not I think it goes over the line, that's, you know, my prerogative. But I genuinely think that this was effective. It was terrifying. And yeah, I just thought it was, I can't even say I loved the story because I didn't love it, but it was fascinating, like deeply fascinating and extremely, extremely comfortable. And I will never, ever forget the cat scene and the wet dream. Like those two things definitely are two things that are going to really stick out to me. And yeah, I think The Body was the one that I was the most excited to read, because it is the one I've heard the most about, as in I do know it was about 4 kids who end up coming across a body, or at least like they're hunting for this body, like they know it's there and they decide to go and look at it. And that is essentially the premise of this. And it definitely stays true to that premise. So I really do want to watch the film, because I think the story was very, again, like a bit like Shawshank Redemption, was very well told, even though like for a lot of this, like a good chunk of this book, not a great deal happened, and it does feel more like drama than anything else, but it's definitely something that I really fully like enjoyed in a way. So I want to give this one a 4-star. I think this one is my second favorite story from the collection, and yeah, it was really good. It almost felt like it in a way, in terms of we have these kids. We have Gordy, Chris, Teddy, and Vern. And Gordy is the main character, the main narrator. And Vern comes to them and is like, hey, do you want to see this dead body? There is a boy who is missing. I think his name was like Ray Brower, who was like hit by a train, and his body is like there. People don't know where he is, and they know where he is. So they want to go and see this body and then tell people about it. A little bit like the friendship between these 4 characters remind me a little bit of the characters in It, like the child characters, and also the sense of childhood and almost like the coming of age aspect of it too, because you do have them almost like growing up as the story goes on, even though it just tells you the story of them making this trek to this this place, which, I mean, it does take a while. It does take them a while, but it doesn't take them that long, as in like, oh, they have time to grow up and stuff. But it's kind of what they experience together, and the fact that they do have to face some like adult things that really forces them to grow up a little bit, and you can feel that as well. So I love like how it kind of starts with this idea of them being kind of like just regular kids. So they have like their own like little hiding spot, and they meet up and they seem to have fun together. And yet at the same time, you see how tragic their family lives are. So Gordy, his brother, was killed a few months before. So his parents are rather neglectful to him. Teddy's dad is genuinely so freaking awful. Absolutely goddamn disgusting. So many parents in Stephen King's world are awful people. And it just makes you feel like, hey, these are just like kids that are meeting up at this like treehouse. And to have to deal with stuff like that from your own parents is genuinely heartbreaking. Even Chris as well has a terrible time with his dad. But yeah, it's Vern. Vern comes up with them and says, you guys want to go see a dead body? And like, that's kind of, and it's like kind of like, huh, like as a child, you're really like intrigued by that, because you're like, a dead body, it feels unnatural. It feels otherworldly. And that's kind of the impression you get with them as they make this adventure. And it does feel like an adventure, like as they're going through like the Castle Rock dump, for instance, which I love the references to Castle Rock. I also love that Cujo was mentioned as well in Jerusalem's Lot too. I love it when Stephen King adds those like little nuggets, those little Easter eggs. But I could really feel the adventure. And then whenever you get, you know, the mention of like a train coming as well, and the fact that they have to dodge it, that could be like really exciting. And it really does like play with your imagination a little bit, because hey, they're on this like dangerous quest and they're about to say something that they really probably shouldn't be saying, and they have to overcome so many things. There was another person that they had to avoid. One thing that bogs the story down as well is that there's a lot of context and boring things that happen as well. Like, I didn't care about the whole Chico section of this. I also didn't care for Gordy's story as well. We get a whole excerpt from Gordy's story. Didn't care about that. Dragged it down for me. I was like, this is really boring. Like, these kind of sections are really quite boring. I know a lot of the time Stephen King does this in his longer novels, which I don't mind as much, because they always do add context to the characters, make them feel more believable and stuff like that. But with this being like a novella, a shorter story, I was hoping for things to feel a little bit more compact. And still, this ran on a little bit too long for me. But going back to the adventure that they're on, a lot of it did remind me of my own childhood. So they're crossing this dump. The dump is one of my strongest memories of Castle Rock. And it just reminds me of like my own childhood, not in Castle Rock, but there would be a dump near where I lived. And sometimes me and my brother and sister would go there and we would just like have fun. And so to kind of be transported back to your childhood while reading this is such an interesting thing considering the subject matter of the story. Like, I never saw a dead body when I was a kid, thank God. And so it's kind of like taking my own childhood and twisting it a little way, which I did appreciate. Oh yeah, here we go, Milo. And he was never without Chopper at his heel. Chopper was, at least until Canber's dog Cujo went rabid 20 years later, the most feared and least seen dog in Castle Rock. So again, I love that little reference to Cujo. Makes his world feel even bigger and more believable, that it all just like has this one universe and it's all horrifying and scary. It just feels so good. But yeah, he will sick Chopper on people. Chopper will grab that hand and hold on, ripping skin and tendons, powdering bones between his slavering jaws until Milo told him to quit. That's genuinely terrifying. I am a little bit scared of dogs. I love dogs, but I'm also a little bit scared of them because of what they could do. And honestly, if you have an owner like Milo, they can really do some damage. So when they actually encounter Milo and Chopper, that part was really exciting. It got my heart racing because Gordy had to run from that. So that was very exciting. Also very exciting when they came across the train as well and they're having to run faster, dickface. It's just such an intense moment, and yet these children are still talking to each other like that. It's a little bit funny in a way, but also like so innocently childlike as well. Like, that's a serious situation. You're about to be flattened by a train and they're just like calling each other names and they're running, and it almost feels a little bit like fun in a way. Yeah, the story excerpt that I wasn't really arsed with was The Revenge of Lord Ass Hogan by Gordon LaChance. You know, I didn't see the need, honestly. Could have totally cut that out and I would not have lost anything in the story. Oh yeah, there was also a lot of dreaming in this as well that I wasn't a big fan of. Again, another reason why I couldn't give it 5 stars. I'm just not a big fan of an overabundance of dreams being part of a story. Whether or not it gives like context or foreshadowing or anything like that, just not a big fan of dreams overtaken. And in every single story, it was so far in this one, there was just like too many dreams. Oh, also the leeches scene, that was rather unnerving. Seeing how grotesque and how big their bodies are, like taking their blood, and like the way that they burst and stuff, absolutely vile. Yeah, and it just kind of keeps going on and on. I get it, like they kind of went a different direction, but it's honestly kind of a little bit exhausting getting towards the end of the story because it just goes on and on and on. And during a lightning storm, that's when they see him. It was kind of brilliant and atmospheric to see it in this one because you have these innocent children who are seeing something irreversible. You know, they're seeing something that is going to, stick with them for the rest of their lives. They see a single pale white hand. Somewhere attached to the hand was the rest of Ray Brower. Then the storm came all at once. Nobody tells you about the pathetic fallacy until you're in college. And even then, I noticed that nobody but the total dorks completely believed it was a fallacy. So I kind of love the idea that there was like this really atmospheric thing happening with the weather, like things changing. It's almost like God was trying to stop them from saying what they were about to say by, deterring them with the weather in a way. So yeah, I kind of like the way that King painted the picture there. The trainer knocked him out of his keds just as it knocked the life out of his body. That finally rammed it all the way home for me. The kid was dead. The kid wasn't sick. The kid wasn't sleeping. And we have this like long paragraph of all the things that the kid can't do anymore. The kid was never going to go out bottling with his friends in the spring. Kid wasn't going to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning on November 1st this year, run to the bathroom and vomit a big glut of cheap Halloween candy. Kid wasn't going to pull a single girl's braid in homeroom. The kid wasn't going to give a bloody nose or get one. Kid can't, don't, won't, never, shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't. And honestly, that really does hit home because it's like, especially for this character as well, I can really feel it through this character who is the same age. It's like, damn, like we are the same age and yet you can't do all these things that I'm about to do in life. And that's when it really hits him. It's when it hits you as well. It's like, life has ended for this young child and it shouldn't have. It's unnatural. And it's heartbreaking to read about all these things that this child can't do. So I do love the fact that this story tackles that, when kids see the body of another kid and how that, affects them in a way, how they interpret the scene. It's honestly a very somber kind of feeling. And I think King, again, portrays it beautifully. Like, this is such a well-written story. It really is. Not, again, a favorite of mine, but 4 stars is still pretty amazing because I really appreciate I really do appreciate what King did with it. He was a boy our age, he was dead, and I reject the idea that anything about it could be natural. I pushed it away with horror. It doesn't feel natural. It really doesn't. And then, yeah, we just find out what happened to them afterwards. A couple of them died later on in life. We also have a Shawshank Penitentiary reference as well in this too, which I kind of liked. But yeah, it was just kind of like life goes on afterwards, and it moved on, and I felt a little bit melancholic after reading this one. It felt like a great story, don't get me wrong, a great story, but it definitely had a bit of a depressing kind of air to it. And yeah, 4 stars, nothing more to say about it really, but it does genuinely make me want to watch the film. Cannot wait to watch the film. And then finally, the breathing method, which I do think will stick with me for the rest of time, considering what happened in it. Like, not a great deal happens for a good majority of this book. And I was like, what are we building up to? Like, where is this going? And oh boy, did we get to a destination. So yeah, this one, we have a guy who gets invited to this kind of almost like a gentleman's club kind of thing where people share stories. We don't ever really hear the stories in full other than one story. One, I think it's like Christmas Eve or something. So like we do get the juxtaposition between these really terrifying stories and, you know, Christmas, which is a great time of joy and love, but also Christmas is a great time for ghost stories as well, like, you know, Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So like I kind of loved the ambience of this one. I thought it worked really well with the kind of telling this story verbally, which could end in horror. And I love the almost like campfire kind of feel of it too. So yeah, we have this doctor telling everyone at this, you know, club thing, which the club itself, it's like a mysterious building. There's like a lot of rooms, and it ends up having like books that don't really seem to be published elsewhere and stuff. So it's a very mysterious place that we don't ever really delve into that much. We just get little questions every now and then, and it's extremely intriguing and extremely interesting. And so I kind of walk away from this story with a little bit more questions than answers. But anyway, I keep going off on little side tangents. The main point of this story is that, you know, this doctor is telling the story about, you know, early in his career, he came across a woman who called herself Sandra, and she is about to have a baby. So she's pregnant, the guy left her, and so she is given a child out of wedlock. So obviously the stigma of the time and people looking down on people like that, it's not great for Sandra. And so like she has to kind of deal with that, which I found very admirable. But the doctor ends up introducing her to the breathing method, which is obviously, you know, like when you are, you know, in labor and you're helping yourself to get the baby out. Essentially, I'm not a doctor myself, so I don't really know the full ins and outs of this breathing method. But it was interesting to see how early on the breathing method goes with this, and how it wasn't really exactly the norm in, like, I think the 1930s where it's set. So I found that deeply interesting, and I was starting to really feel a connection to Sandra as well. I was feeling so bad for her, but I admired her so much. And then as she's in labor, she's in a taxi, and the taxi is close to the hospital, but it veers off the road. I think it's like very icy. And so it veers off the road. The doctor is there to see it. The person telling the story is there to see it happen. And the poor woman ends up getting decapitated during that whole thing. But yet she's still in labor. She's still breathing. She's doing the breathing method. So I think she's doing like the whole thing. I think she's still doing that. Like her body is still doing that. And yet her head is not there anymore. And so he has to deliver this baby in the back of this taxi thing with a headless woman. And the headless woman is still doing the breathing method throughout the entire process. Like, I can't even begin to describe, it probably doesn't sound as scary as I'm saying it out loud, but reading that entire section was genuinely so unnerving. Oh my gosh. Like, Apt Pupil, I think, had like two of the most unnerving things ever, but this is also up there with that. Yeah, the doctor runs towards the taxi, and he ends up kicking something by accident. The thing I'd kicked skidded away, like the young woman's purse. It slid rather than rolled. It skidded away, and it was only the fall of hair, blood streaked but still recognizably blonde, speckled with bits of glass. That made me realize what it was. She'd been decapitated in the accident. When I kicked into the frozen gutter was her head. Oh my god. Oh, chills. The woman was still breathing, you see, gentlemen. Her chest was heaving up and down in quick, light, shallow breaths. It was air being pulled into her severed windpipe and then exhaled again, the little screams of air through the crude reed of the vocal cords which no longer had a mouth to shape their sounds. Oh, like beautifully written, like genuinely terrifying. That's disgusting, but that was so beautiful as well. I don't know if he realized the corpse was still somehow breathing or not. Chickens may walk around for a while with their heads cut off, but people only twitch once or twice, if that. But her headless body is still doing the locomotive breathing. I sometimes hear it still, gentlemen, in my dreams. I would too. Like, that is nightmare fuel. Rather than someone down, the locomotive breathing had actually begun to speed up, and then her body turned hard again, locked and strained, and the baby crowned again. She gives birth, and she's headless. Her eyes were open, those direct hazel eyes that had been full of such life and such determination. They were full of determination still. Gentlemen, she was seeing me. Its lips part and says, "Thank you, Dr. McCarran." Obviously, like, no sound comes out because no vocal cords or anything, but it mouthed the words. Oh, I don't think I could ever sleep again if I saw that in real life. This has to be like the most grossest and vilest thing I've read in a Stephen King story so far. And the fact that the labor was actually minutes, like it wasn't even just a few seconds of, you know, maybe the body spasming or anything like that. It was minutes. Minutes. Oh, like I'll never be able to get that out of my head. Like that's pretty much like the only thing I really want to talk about with the story, because it was the main thing that stuck out to me. Because honestly, yeah, like before this, there were little bits of intriguing things about the sort of like club that they are kind of running, but like nothing too outward, nothing too in your face or anything, just like little breadcrumbs of intrigue. But honestly, the freaking ending of this, where we got to the point of the story and we found out what the breathing method kind of pertained to, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that definitely will stay with me. It was genuinely vile. Giving this story 4 stars because, yeah, like not a great deal happened. Maybe I was bored once or twice during the initial telling of the story, but I will never forget this. I will never forget this, Stephen King. You will rue the day. And I do think that moment stands out over pretty much everything else in the body, weirdly enough, to me personally, as something that really just got under my skin. I probably prefer the body in like overall packaging, but the breathing method itself, definitely one that sticks with me. But yes, I'm only giving it 4 stars and nothing higher because, yeah, it did take a little while to get into it. And yeah, I just don't think it's like a favorite, but definitely a favorite moment. That moment itself was worth so much. I probably would have given this 3 stars up until that moment. So that gives different seasons an average of 4.0 out of 5, which is above Night Shift, which I did give 4 stars overall, just in like good feeling. I will give different seasons a 4-star overall as well, because the average does work out. And also I do feel like it's a really strong, solid 4-star. I will never forget Apt Pupil and the breather method. I will never forget those. The body was brilliantly written, as was Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. That was brilliantly written too. It was fantastically written novella collection, genuinely. All unique in their own ways and genuinely such a good time. So I do think I prefer different seasons just a little bit more than Night Shift. Even though Night Shift had a couple of 5-star stories in it, it also had quite a few that dragged it down. So I think different seasons was a lot more consistent, was better written overall, a lot tighter, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy it. I cannot wait to read more short story collections and novella collections from Stephen King. He really thrives with some shorter stuff, honestly. And yeah, I just didn't think I would find things in these collections that would really stick with me. But alas, here we are. So that is episode 6 done, my very first time reading short story collections and novellas. And I think every 2 or 3 episodes, I will do the short story and novella collections in between like the longer novels. I think that would work in helping to break down some of his longer stuff. So in a few episodes, I will be doing the next 2 short story collections. However, in episode 7, the next one that I want to do that I'm aiming to get out around about November, we'll be covering these 4 beautiful books right here. So we'll be covering The Dark Half, which I will be reading for the very first time. Not 100% sure what it's about, honestly, but then I have Needful Things, which I vaguely kind of know the basic premise of this, and it honestly excites me because it sounds like something I would really love. So I'm very excited to read this for the first time. And then the next 2 books I have already read before, but it's been a long time. So one of them is Gerald's Game. I saw the film adaptation, which I honestly loved. I thought was fantastically acted and it was genuinely creepy. And I did read this after watching the film, and I did really enjoy this when I read it then. So we'll see if I still enjoy it upon a reread. And then finally, Dolores Claiborne, which I have also read before, but I remember absolutely nothing from it. It's been a long time since I read this one. I remember nothing from it. And then after this, the only Stephen King book that I've read before is Rose Madder, and everything else is brand new. So when we get to Rose Madder, that will be the very last reread for my Gavin Reads All the King series, and everything else will be fresh. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave this video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of Night Shift and different seasons. Let me know if you have any favorite short stories or any favorite novellas, any stories in particular from these 2 collections that you personally loved. I would love to chat about them down below. I would give a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting my channel. If you join my Patreon, then the link is in the description box. But yeah, I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye.